Coming up on the DRS Train podcast.
I think he's the first person to win the championship and still fail.
Well done to Lando. So if you're commenting thinking that I'm anti-Lando, I am not.
Cool. What happened for the rest of the season?
He was just blindingly average.
When we're debating it in 10 years or whatever, this will be peak Russell.
That was the only thing that mattered to Verstappen.
That himself with a career death sentence.
Oscar, Lando just crashed. Could you please just slam it into the wall now?
Ron Dennis would be spinning in his grave. Well, if he were dead.
This is the DRS train.
If you'd said at the start of 2025 that after Australia the title would go down to the wire and between three drivers, everyone would think you were mad. Nonetheless, McLaren demonstrated that having the fastest car isn't everything if you don't also have the fastest driver. I'm Peter Brook. I'm joined by... God, who am I joined by? Nedzo's F1 Gridbox, Motorsport Madness, Josh Revel, Ace Shield, Psychedelicon, Chizzy, and Kyron. And you're listening to the DRS Train podcast. Yeah, so now, interesting season 2025. Well, I think started weakly and ended very, very strongly. If you ignore the literal end, which was Abu Dhabi, a lot of big things happened. The title battle ends up going in a very unpredictable direction. We haven't seen something like this in a very long time. It has auras of 2007 and 1986, but only the difference is this time it didn't quite go the way of the third driver, but Max didn't seem to care. But either way, we got ourselves a new champion. Lando's the 35th champion. And yeah, very good season. Maybe I'll go to Con first, because we haven't had you on for a while. Yeah, just give a few thoughts on what you thought of 2025 overall to get things going.
Disgusting. There were races where especially in the first half of the year, there were races where I stayed up to watch it late, and it just wasn't worth it. And to watch Piastri fall apart like that, to watch McLaren sort of turn on him, to watch Norris stumble to a title in such a dominant car, to watch Max claw it back. That's the one magnificent part of the season at the front. But I mean, there was other interesting stuff to watch. Further down the grid, there were drivers. We had surprise standouts like Hadjar. We had a solid season from Alonso. We had some... Yeah, we had... What else was there? Hülkenberg had his podium. There was a lot of stuff happening, so it was not a horrible season just at the front. Nedzo?
I mean, I suppose at least we got F1's first homosexual world champion. There's that. But overall, I think that it could have been better. It's probably the worst three-way title battle in F1 history in terms of entertainment, in terms of performances. So, like, we look at 1981, you look at 1986, you look at 2007. It's just not on that level.
Yeah, I think the point of McLaren didn't have the best driver. They didn't even have the third best driver on the grid. And it really showed, I think, this season that there were, I think, in my opinion, at least three people who could have easily won in that McLaren. And also we had, again, 4 races with no DNFs. And yeah, it's just going to be interesting, obviously, next year. It's going to be different cars. Maybe we'll have some failures that obviously weren't a thing this year. But yeah, I think we just saw what happens when you make an incredibly restrictive rule set and then give teams time to just optimize it to the absolute maximum, and you get a season like this.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's very similar to all of yours, it seems. It had everything, but nothing at the same time, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And again, it was a close fight, but it wasn't terribly exciting. And from my perspective as a Max fan, went into that final race sort of knowing what was going to happen. So just sort of sat back and just watched what happened, not really expecting much, and nothing really happened. It had its moments, of course, the season. It's been better than a couple of seasons in the last 5 years. But again, it just lacked that real grippiness and edge of your seat stuff. But again, it was decent at best.
I think the problem...
Yeah, go on.
I think the problem, and it's not just about this rule set, it's just the way it is in Formula One history, is that even if you have this very restrictive rule set and you keep them for years so that there is a performance convergence, it always happens that there is one or two teams that are clear best of the others. And this year it was McLaren and Red Bull, and maybe they had 2-3 tenths over the midfield. Yes, but the point is those 2-3 tenths of the midfield, they almost never got closed up. Like maybe it would have been 20-30 years ago, 2-3 tenths. It's a huge swing from one race up to another, so it creates more unpredictability. Nowadays, that doesn't happen. We had Haas in Mexico closing the gap to the front runners, and that was one race. We had Williams, I think Baku and Qatar, maybe, they closed the gap to the front runners and they were very close on pace. It seems very close, the grid, but it really isn't, because the gaps don't change very much. And so you start the year 2-3 times behind McLaren, and the only way Red Bull could close the gap was because McLaren stopped developing. So we get these very close Q1s, Q2s, but ultimately it's always the same front runners, the same midfielders. And so that over 24 races, unlike the past, it gets very repetitive.
Yeah, there's not a heck of a lot I can add to what everyone said about the season, really. It was, like, again, it was very peculiar in the sense that a lot seemed to happen, yet strangely empty feeling at the end of it. Not to say that the champion was undeserving. I think that's totally false for anybody. There is no such thing as an undeserving champion. But it was just a weird feeling, I guess, for a lot of people at the end of it. Can't describe it. Started off weak, ended pretty well, and I guess there was a lot of foot shooting going along, which sort of helped propel that toward that finale. But yeah, I think one of the standout things really was that the driver who everyone's talking about and the one who sort of went to another level of himself and earned the plaudits of everybody was not the guy who was the champion, which is strange.
Ciaron?
Hard to add much when 7 people brilliantly make their points, but I would say that the season itself was a masterclass in how to make something easy or relatively easy much more difficult than it should have been, even if we do have to congratulate the new world champion. Lando is a very fast driver. I would say the standout for me, though, that I didn't hear anyone else say was the caliber of the rookie class. This was the strongest rookie class that Formula One has seen in many years. And that's good. It's good that we're having a talented group of 3 or 4 young drivers come in and perform. And so while I agree with everyone's comments earlier that, it was a bit of an anticlimax because McLaren did have the quickest car, at least we can count on more and more talented drivers to join the fray in the years to come.
So to get this started, we're going to go back to, effectively before the season, because when we did our season preview, we made a whole bunch of predictions about what we thought was going to happen. So we thought it would be good to look back on those and kind of have a bit of fun and see what was and wasn't correct. And so Con has those, I believe. So over to you, Con.
I have a nice list with all of our predictions from the preseason. And the people who made the predictions were Peter and myself, Nedzo, Ciaron, and Yukari, who did not join us today, but we also have his predictions here. And the first category that we predicted was the crasher of the year. And I mean, the answers, one driver was named 4 times. Can you guys guess what driver was named 4 times?
Stroll?
Not Stroll.
Maldonado. No, I'm kidding, Enzo.
Actually,
Albon?
Nope.
Behrman?
Stroll.
Not Behrman wasn't even named at all. No, the person who four people said Antonelli.
Oh,
Four
that
people
makes
thought
sense.
that Antonelli would be the one who crashes the most, and the second most predicted driver was Hadjar. 3 people predicted that Hadjar would crash the most, including Nedzo and myself and Yukari. And Stroll was named 2 times, Leclerc was named once, and Doohan was named once. So Stroll didn't crash much. I think he only crashed in practice, I think. Did he crash in quali? I don't remember. I didn't want
He crashed in quali at Zandvoort and then crashed into Ocon in the sprint at Austin.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So Hadjar crashed on
Australia.
Australia, of course, and
Silverstone with Antonelli.
Doohan didn't get much time to crash.
But he still did a lot of it.
Still did.
There was the DRS crash at Suzuka, and then he hit. I think he crashed it. He crashed in Australia on the first lap, and then he hit Lawson in Miami.
In the pit lane, wasn't it?
No, it was at the start. That was Max. Yeah.
How much did Antonelli crash?
He cost Max the championship in Austria. And
Zandvoort.
Yeah, he killed Leclerc in Zandvoort.
Okay. Well, did he crash the most? Who did crash the most?
How much did Sainz crash at the start of the year? Because there was Australia. Was that just it?
I think it was only Australia. There weren't many people that crashed loads.
Sainz had a lot of incidents. Sainz was spun around a lot on the first lap by drivers like Tsunoda and stuff like that. But
he hit Antonelli Kota as well. Did Sainz?
Tsunoda and Bortoleto, I think, are the main culprits.
I think Bortoleto would have probably been the biggest crasher.
Yes,
to be honest, followed by Tsunoda. No,
I would have thought Tsunoda, because he had some pretty horrendous ones this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's between Tsunoda and Bortoleto. I think those are a good shout.
According to the Destructors Championship, it was Bortoleto, Norris, then Tsunoda.
Norris.
Yes,
I'm assuming it's because of his crashes were quite high profile, and they like took out gearboxes and stuff.
Yeah, probably.
Where did
Jeddah
qualifying? Canada, yeah.
And not Baku. Baku was just a bad performance. Yeah.
That's only 2 crashes. I can't think of any more that Lando did.
Unless he crashed in practice and we're just forgetting it.
Yeah. Lewis had a few because he had Yas Marina practice. He crashed in Zandvoort. Another one, I think, somewhere else.
Does anybody remember everybody who crashed in quali at Baku? Because I think there were like 6-7 drivers who crashed that day.
Weren't there 7 red flags or something? Yes.
Piastri and Leclerc, I remember them crashing.
Albon crashed.
He touched the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, Albon immediately crashed at the beginning.
Colapinto crashed under a red flag.
Oh yeah, the one Alpine crashed, and then the other Alpine crashed right next to him.
Yeah.
One Alpine broke down, I think, or something like that.
I think Colapinto had a fair few crashes as well, didn't he? This year?
I think last year he did. I don't know about this year. In general, he was just across the board not great. But I think it's that weird thing. It's a bit like with Colton Herta in IndyCar. Like, he has that early reputation, and it sort of carries over. And people think, oh, he's crash prone. And then you look back at the results, like, well, no, it's not that many crashes. So, I don't know.
Colapinto, he had the big crash. There was quali at Imola, his first race back.
That's it.
He crashed.
Then there was Baku, which was dumb.
Yeah,
that was a dumb crash.
He also, I think he got hit by Albon in the race, or Heat as well.
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah,
Brazil.
There's the collision with Lewis at Brazil, although that was more Lewis's fault.
I remember Brazil sprint as well. He spun out,
and then the Brazil sprint where he went off in sympathy with Piastri and
Hülkenberg.
Was it Hülkenberg?
Yeah.
Well, I think we should move on.
Mm-hmm.
The next prediction that we made was quali merchant of the year. What driver would shine the most in quali, even if maybe the definition of quali merchant is that I presented at the time was something like where the quali outshines the races to some degree. Like the quali merchants are usually the guys who fly the most in quali, and then they're maybe not as impressive in the races, but the quali is where they make the that's basically their show. And the predictions we made there's almost no overlap. Ciaron said Russell and Antonelli would be quali merchants of the year, which is interesting, both Mercedes drivers. Nedzo said Hülkenberg and Leclerc. Leclerc is a reasonable guess. I mean, Leclerc is usually a pretty good qualifier. This year he wasn't too impressive, I think, but yeah. Yukari said Norris. I said Leclerc. And Peter said Leclerc and Gasly. So actually 3 people said Leclerc. And Gasly was Peter's like dark horse shout. So it's like he always often goes overlooked. And he did make Q3 a number of times, so
he did, yeah.
Good shout.
I'm just consulting the qualifying championship, which Lando also won. Gasly got 28 qualifying points, which puts him 14th, which is quite a bit higher than his overall championship result.
22 points he got in actuality.
Yeah. Hadjar was 9th in qualifying. He's 77 points. I think that's definitely higher than in races.
Nobody saw his good form coming. Like he was almost always in Q3.
Yeah. The rest of them are quite similar to where they were in the actual championship.
Yeah. It's no one who really stands out, who was great in quali but didn't really deliver on the races then.
Antonelli got that pole at Miami Sprint, which kind of came out of nowhere, didn't it? But then he had a lot of quite crap qualies as well, such as Australia and Abu Dhabi and Vegas as well.
Took him a long time to get up to speed, but then he started matching Russell, or at least being very close in the final third of the year. So, should we move on to the next category?
Yes.
Comeback team of the year. What team would make the biggest gains relative to the rest of the grid throughout the year, or even relative to last year? What team would make the biggest comeback of any definition that you'd describe? And the predictions were. Williams was said by Peter and Ciaron. Peter also said Red Bull, which Nedzo agreed with. Yukari said Aston Martin, which is a reasonable guess due to Newey's arrival there, although that didn't have much impact on the season. Maybe it did, I don't know. Ace can comment on that. He's the resident Aston Martin expert. And I said Sauber. And my reasoning was that Sauber would start last the year and finish last, but they would start being 1.5 seconds off and they would finish being 0.9 seconds off. And so, in that manner of speaking, would make the biggest gains without actually changing position. But they did enter the midfield from being one of the back markers. So that's, even Sauber made good improvements. A lot of teams make good improvements. Who was the comeback team of the year? What would you say?
It's got to be Williams, in my opinion. I think Sauber showed clear performance games, but Williams made a huge jump, right, from the back to solid midfield and podiums, right? I mean, if you look at the point difference between 2024 and 2025, it was immense, right? I mean, Williams were, I think, second to last or close to last year. This year, they jumped several spots. And did they finish 5th? In the constructors,
they did.
So top 5 after being back markers last season. So that's really, I think, what constitutes a proper, comeback season or improvement. And Carlos Sainz had a huge part to do with that as well, with his late season resurgence. But
is this comeback relative to last year, or is it who started the season badly and ended the season really well?
Whatever you interpret it to be, if it's between the seasons or if it's throughout the year, we mostly discussed throughout the year, but some of the answers were also between seasons.
Right. Okay.
Like Ciaron, for example, described the impact that Sainz would have even before the season would start.
Yeah, I mean, the way I looked at it is just like what team was not good last year and this year had a better season relative to last year over year performance. But there's other ways to look at this on a year over year basis. I'm going with Williams, but I could see somebody going with Haas or Sauber because they also had upward trend, right?
Even Aston went from being basically dead last at the start, or joined dead last with Sauber, to basically joining the midfield.
I think
Ace
Red Bull's also a
wants to
dark
say
horse.
something about that, I think.
Okay.
I think the biggest improver in the year was Red Bull. They went from a few times slower than McLaren to being the faster car at the end of the year, at least in the hands of Verstappen. So strictly about 2025, I think Red Bull takes it.
That's
I mean,
fair.
the thing is okay. I mean, Ace, I agree that like they did have an incredible performance within the season as a comeback, but was that really because their car got that much faster, or was that because one of the McLaren drivers had a bit of a collapse and the other one was not as consistent as he should have been? I mean, that's debatable. Anyways.
It's not really a comeback from Red Bull, it's a comeback from Max, because Tsunoda didn't go anywhere. Like, he stayed the same all season. It was Max that improved and got better.
I mean, McLaren stopped the upgrades before June, and so many other teams did the same. Ferrari, Williams, in July, Sauber and Aston Martin. Alpine, I don't even think they brought many upgrades themselves. You know, it was only two teams that really continue the upgrades until the end of the year, until Austin, and those were Red Bull and Haas. And I think Haas started the year quite strong and finished the year quite strong. I think Red Bull started the year as second best, with Ferrari and Mercedes fighting there, to being best, only fighting with McLaren. So even from strictly an upgrade point of view, it was Red Bull the biggest improver, because almost nobody else cared enough.
I honestly think, and I'm going to stop so others can jump in after this, like, your choice is logical. I think their mid to late season improvement was driver-led, not team-led. I think Verstappen's results are masking fundamental weaknesses rather than proving some theory about, organizational recovery in that team. I don't think it became the class of the field, and I don't even think they outdeveloped McLaren credibly. So the fact that they finished, third in the constructors, that's not really a hallmark of a team that had a great comeback or anything like that. So I look at it more like damage limitation with a resurgence, right? Verstappen had a tremendous title campaign. There were moments of madness, like Spain, like some of the other moments that we can mention later on, but I don't think that was a comeback. But I see where you're coming from, but I would actually disagree with that.
If we want, I think, okay. So in my opinion, Williams also had very much of a driver-led comeback, because at the beginning of the season, Williams was a very competitive car in the hands of Albon, while Sainz was just awful. And then this balance of power shifted between them, and suddenly Albon was awful, and Sainz scored basically all of the points of Williams towards the end of the season. They had very, very few double points. They had 0 double points after Monaco, actually. After that, only one of them ever scored points. Albon had 0 points in actual races from Spain onwards, which is just insane how he managed to do that in the 5th fastest car, which it clearly was. So in my opinion, I would give it to Haas if you're talking about the improvement within the season, as towards the end both Behrman got into his own and Ocon started trending upwards slightly. So in my opinion, I would give it to Haas.
Okay. Should we move on?
Yeah, go on.
The next category was Teammate Destroyer of the Year, and there was also an appendix to the question, which would have been who beats more than one teammate. And I think in the predictions that actually weighed quite heavily for you guys in what you answered. So 3 people, Ciaron, Peter, and Yukari, said that Gasly would be the Teammate Destroyer of the Year, which also makes sense when you're looking at who they would be racing against, even if the teammate would switch. Peter also said Alonso would be Teammate Destroyer of the Year, one of them. Nedzo and Yukari said Max, and my prediction is probably the worst because I said Sainz. And well, that didn't quite happen. Should have happened, but so much happened that in the first half of the year, he basically was unable to score as he should have scored. He lost easily 30 points there. But yes, so that's the predictions everyone made. Ciaron said Gasly. That surprised me, but who was the teammate destroyer of the year ultimately? It must have been Max, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Max
yeah.
and Leclerc maybe.
I think it has to be Max or Fernando Alonso. I don't think Leclerc was quite as dominant. I mean, Leclerc destroyed Hamilton, but Fernando Alonso obliterated Lance Stroll in qualifying. I think he beat him every session. That's humiliating. And Max Verstappen. Actually, it has to be Max Verstappen. That point gap and the multiple. I've never seen anything like that. Like guys, what was the multiple of difference between Tsunoda and Verstappen? At one point, it was like Max had 12 times the number of points, something like that. That is like in a car that's like the third fastest. I can't even believe that.
So 421 to 33. That's a factor of 13.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is absolutely unbelievable. I will no comment.
That's more than Schumacher in 1994 against Verstappen, Leto, and Herbert.
Wasn't there a championship? I think it was Fittipaldi. There was the champion
Dave
driver,
Walker.
and his
Dave
teammate
Walker.
didn't score points at all.
Same thing happened PK with
Rabat.
and Zanino scored hardly anything as well, I think, in 80. No, 83 was the other one.
Patrese.
Yeah. Yeah, but against Rabat, he kind of shat on him, and yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if we count 0 as a number, then technically Gasly beat Colapinto by a factor of 22, but it wasn't quite such a...
Technically, he beat him by a factor of 1,000,000 because...
In Infinity, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Gasly
the
was
thing...
the most common prediction.
Yeah, but the thing is like, let's think about it in the context of a car that is capable of scoring at least, a certain number of points. The Alpine was not exactly super competitive. So the way I look at it is like, this is a car that finished third in the constructors, and we have a multiple of 13x as the difference. That is ridiculous. Like I don't even... Like, how embarrassed would you be if you were Tsunoda? Okay, you're a Formula One driver, you're making lots of good money, but apart from that, like, I'd wear a paper bag over my head. I mean, that's embarrassing, dude. Like,
I think
you
Tsunoda
can't let that happen. I mean, keep it to 3 times, keep it to double the points, 13 times. Pathetic. Honestly, with all due respect to him.
Yeah, sorry. Someone posted a graphic of all the driver salaries of this season, and Tsunoda, of all the established drivers, I think he has the lowest salary of all.
Well deserved.
All the non-rookies or non-half rookies.
He's never had a big salary, I think. He's when he was at AlphaTauri, it wasn't that large.
Honda might be paying him something extra. Maybe that only covers the Red Bull salary, and Honda might be paying him extra. I don't know. Maybe not anymore now, but we'll see what happens to him. This rookie thing brings me right to the next prediction, which was Rookie of the Year. And 3 of us predicted Antonelli, and Peter also added that Hadja would be the worst Rookie of the Year. And Ciaron said Bortoleto would be Rookie of the Year. Nedzo didn't actually make a prediction, I don't think. I think we accidentally skipped him at the time. When I listened back, I didn't find Nedzo's prediction. But yes.
I would have probably said Badman.
The thing is, you and Peter, and I think even Ciaron, I think 2 or 3 people deliberately counted out Colapinto, Behrman, and Lawson because you said they're not real rookies, which they weren't. So, yeah. That's basically, it gave yourselves 3 drivers to choose from. 3 of you chose Antonelli, Ciaron chose Bortoleto, and Peter made the worst call by calling Hadja the worst rookie, which nobody would have seen coming that he'd end up being maybe the best. We'll get to that later, but we could actually discuss that now. Who was the Rookie of the Year? Because this is actually the time to maybe talk about that.
Yeah.
And
I did a post on this. It's Hadjar. It was Hadjar, for sure, in my opinion, because if you actually look at Hadjar's season, he kept a very strong performance baseline, and ultimately had the least amount of fluctuation, and had the most. He came back from a horrible start, right? He put it in the barriers on the formation lap in Australia, but then he just bounced back from that, right? He basically started alongside one driver, then went up against another driver, and he just clearly came out ahead, right, in the points, in qualifying, in the race head to head. If you like look at the big picture, he, I think, did the best job overall, especially given all the other contenders, which I think be Antonelli and Behrman. They had their moments of madness that were, I think, considerably worse. So I give it to Hadjar.
I think that the variance of results was a lot higher, as you said, for the other drivers like Antonelli and Behrman. But I think that Behrman's peaks, the fact that he went up against Ocon and not Liam Lawson, put him above. The fact that from at least like maybe the second third of the season, in terms of like the middle part of the year, there was no question who was better in that Haas. And yeah, and Hadjar, like, especially in the first half of the season, he started to exact a great margin on Lawson, but then that gap started reeling in again once Lawson started to reel in his confidence. I'd say that Behrman edges out Hadjar just for his peaks, and that his lows weren't as bad as people say they were. Like, people like to say, like, there are people online who say, for example, that he's got 10 penalty points. How can we consider him the best when most of those penalty points were stupid at best and just not necessary at worst? So yeah, I'd say, yeah, I'd go Behrman and then a very close second, Hadjar.
If Europe didn't exist, Antonelli would be the Rookie of the Year pretty easily. He scored 150 points. Can you guess how many of those he scored in Europe?
20.
3.
Oh.
3. He managed to score 3 entire points in Europe, if we count Baku as Asia, which I do for the sake of this argument at least. So if that didn't happen. Yeah, and you can't even say that, oh, well, he just probably had like a 3-month slump, because right in the middle of Europe there is Canada, and he got a podium there. So it's just absolutely amazing how he managed to be awful at one hyper-specific continent and then just be a very good rookie everywhere else. But my vote would go to Hadjar as well, on the basis of just pure consistency, and then just, especially in qualifying, he had like just 8 or 9 race Q3 streak or something like that. Very, very impressive. So Behrman's peaks were definitely the highest, but I would give it to Hadjar overall.
People did also notice that Antonelli basically turned into Senna in countries where some drug or some chemical is legal or whatever that was going on.
Titanium dioxide or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah. He just had. I wanted to say driver of the season, but the thing is, he did a fantastic job of screwing Max over this year, because he takes him out in Austin, in Spain. Not technically his fault, but the safety car that caused them to put Max on the hard and him to have a hissy fit and everything, that was caused by him. And then of course there's that wobble in Qatar, which at the end of the day it made no difference, but at the time we thought that might cost Max the championship. So he just kind of got in the way a lot. In the way that back in the day, Max, maybe I noticed this as a Vettel fan, he was very good at just messing up Vettel's title campaigns and getting in the way with him as well. And Antonelli's kind of done a similar thing with Max, and just made too many big mistakes, even though he did have amazing races like Canada or Vegas.
Ace, Josh?
I'll go first. I think it goes to Hadjar pretty easily, because it's always hard to judge, because clearly Hadjar had the easiest job out of all the rookies. He had Lawson as a teammate, which is half a rookie himself. He was at Racing Bull, which has always had rookie drivers, and so they know how to handle and cooperate with inexperienced drivers. While instead we have Behrman, we have Bortoleto. They were up against Ocon, Hülkenberg. These two are flawed drivers, but they're very experienced. They're a much harsher bar to overcome than Lawson. And then we have Antonelli, and Antonelli was the complete opposite situation. I mean, I went to check. That team didn't have a rookie driver since the Japan 2003 when they picked up Takuma Sato, and they were still Honda at the time. So clearly we have from Japan 2003, in comparison, Toro Rosso, Minardi, now Visa Cash App Racing Bull, they had 19 rookie drivers. So it's completely
Sato Jordan in 2002.
Yeah, he wasn't a rookie in 2003.
Takuma Sato wasn't a rookie.
No, 2002.
Racing Jordan in 2002.
He was Jordan. Ricardo Zonta was a rookie in 1999 when BAR became a thing.
Okay, so it's even further back.
Yeah.
Okay, I swear it was. I guess I was very wrong. Anyway, you see the point. Antonelli was in a much harsher situation than what Achar was in. So, it's hard to judge, but even as an Antonelli sympathizer, I have to give it to Achar. He was very good this year. He had some races that I could expect from the best drivers on the grid. I remember Singapore. I remember how absolutely screwed over he got by that engine issue. And then somehow was still in the hunt for a point that only circumstances took away from him. He was fighting with Tsunoda the entire race. He was making use of Verstappen and Norris's blue flags to catch some laps away from maybe Tsunoda always on his tail. So I was extremely impressed by the harsher races Hajar had to do. He behaved in a way I was not expecting at all from a rookie driver. So I have to give it to Hajar.
Yeah, I definitely more to Hajar. I mean, all four rookies this year have been exceptional. Like, at various stages, they displayed their strengths. Like, Borto showed a lot of good stuff all year, and he outqualified Hulk quite a lot more than I was expecting. And in the mid-season, he was tremendous. Now, obviously, we know what Antonelli did the moment that Europe disappeared, and who knows if that carries on to next year, then fantastic. Then you had the Bear, Oliver the Bear Behrman, who you saw what he was doing in that Haas, and especially in Mexico. And again, you're just like, he's actually going to get a podium in a Haas. Like, what am I looking at here? But the guy who did get a podium, Hajar and Zandvoort, that was special, and he was pretty damn special for a lot of the year. As was Behrman. So it was just a good crop of rookies, which is great to see, especially since, some of the other rookies we had in recent years. I just give it to Hajar on this one, just on balance. But they all had great moments this year, so it'd be interesting to see how they go in the future years from here on in.
I would just like to say, I think no one's really mentioned him, but I do think Colapinto's season has gone under the radar. I think that the fact that he was able to, at a lot of points, match Gasly or beat him, showed, considering that Gasly is considered maybe not the king of the midfield, but definitely one of the top drivers in that midfield machinery. Considering that Colapinto he's still not done a full season in Formula One. Yes, he's pretty much there in terms of starts, but I think that you should watch out for him next season, especially his peak performances. Like, he does still need to cut out a bit of the error proneness, but I think that will come with experience.
Hasn't he done like 28 races
yeah.
He's done, I think, so he did 9 races in 24, I believe.
Okay, so
and now about 19. So yeah, 26, 27 races. So yeah, he's got about a season worth of experience, but I think he'll get better in 26.
I mean, he ended the season on the almost the exact same quality gap as Doohan had to Gasly. Like, there were 2,000s between them. the average quality gap between both of them.
But the race pace was a lot
in a whole
different.
season, quality pace, in a whole season where you had time to adapt and catch Gasly, perhaps. I haven't answered the actual question yet, which is my rookie of the year. I mean, Hadjar is definitely my rookie of the year. Doesn't really need much discussion. Behrman is one that I have a hard time rating Behrman's rookie season, well, if we call it that, very highly, because I don't think that Behrman has a benchmark. And that's because Ocon comes. We're basically seeing the worst Ocon has ever been in an F1 season right now, in my opinion, because he went in the second half of 2024. Gasly basically wiped the floor with him for the most part, and then Ocon hasn't really adjusted well to the Haas. He's had like 3 standout weekends, and the rest of the year he was nowhere, and that's why I have a hard time. Like, I know that if we were seeing Ocon 2021, and if Behrman were running circles around that Ocon, rookie of the year, no question. It's like a magnificent performance by Behrman, but that's not the Ocon we're seeing. We're seeing the Ocon who's out in Q1 when Behrman easily makes Q2. We're seeing the Ocon who struggles in races to make any progress whatsoever. This is not the Ocon that matched or beat Alonso. This is not that Ocon. And that's why I have a hard time seeing Ocon as a benchmark for Behrman, even though Behrman has been relatively convincing. He's quite useless in the wet, but apart from that, he's had a very convincing year. But it's hard to judge where exactly is that Haas, because Ocon's not performing. There's no consistency between the drivers now and last year. Behrman literally went into the season with more experience in the Haas than Ocon had. So I don't know. There's my reasoning for not putting Behrman at the top. And then of course Russell, we've already said that he was up against the toughest teammate, Antonelli. Antonelli, not the Russell. And that's why I think my number one is Hadjar, Antonelli, and then I guess then I put Behrman. I had Bortoletto rated quite highly until he had that 3-race stretch where he was absolutely abysmal. Like he showed a lot of promise this year, and he's had the upper hand on Hülkenberg in quali, make no mistake. Not in the races, but of course he's still lacking the experience, and Hülkenberg is one of the most experienced F1 drivers. So there's that. Should we go through the next few categories quickly, because the next ones are not as interesting? What we predicted. We predicted the first driver penalized for cursing, which, well, 2 people said Hadjar, said Max, Ciaron said Hadjar, Yukari said Norris, and I said Tsunoda. I don't even know if any driver got penalized for cursing.
No.
Don't think anyone did, no.
That's irrelevant. Let's move on then. Which team cheats first? Nedzo said Alpine, Ciaron said Aston, I said Red Bull. I think Peter also said Red Bull, I'm not sure. That's one I didn't quite catch. And Yukari said McLaren. So 4 different predictions. Did any team get caught cheating, per se? I mean, the McLaren WDNF, they were running the car too low. I guess that counts.
Ferrari
It wasn't cheating
WDSQ.
because they got caught.
Sorry?
Ferrari WDSQ at China, along with Gasly.
True, yes.
Yeah.
That would probably be.
Hulkenberg got a disqualification in Bahrain as well for being underweight, I think.
So who cheated first?
Well, they're technically Ferrari, if we're going on that. But I'm trying to think if anyone introduced an upgrade that they were told they couldn't have. Because we had that big technical directive in Spain where they got rid of the flexi wings. Yeah. And then I've forgotten that had happened because absolutely nothing changed on the grid. It made no difference to anybody.
In the predictions, we all guessed that would have quite the impact, that teams would really have to change it around, that the order might change from that. But nothing happened. So it must have been Ferrari then who cheated first. I think we should just move on and not waste more time on that one.
Yeah.
Worst penalty of the year. Who earns himself the worst penalty? Ciaron said it would be Sainz for basically intelligently passing Albon, or like some trickery, I guess, some move that someone wouldn't be happy with, and that would lead to some sort of incident.
Worst penalty. I mean, I think the move that offended me the most was Bortoletto going bowling.
Yes, that was
in Vegas.
Yeah.
So that was ridiculous. Like It was just rookie error, and he deserved that penalty, if not more. It was not Formula One caliber, with greatest respect to Gabriel Bortoleto, but that was the incident that I remember the most of just like sheer incompetence. I mean, Antonelli had some bad moments, but I think that moment was just that's not Formula One caliber level driving. Even though Bortoleto is a Formula One caliber level driver, that was a horrific penalty to take. Especially since it's near the end of the year, the rookie should be maturing rather than just like, making such a judgment of error.
Yeah.
In terms of the most controversial penalty, the only one I can think of is Piastri in Brazil. Because everyone was looking at that thinking, actually, that's more on Antonelli, that collision.
Piastri in Silverstone as well. There was a lot of debate about that.
Oh, yeah. That one was...
Behrman in Silverstone, mate.
Behrman in quali.
A lot of Behrman. I was going to mention him.
Yeah, so there's a few names. My prediction was that Stroll would be a safe bet to cause a collision and get a penalty. I think didn't he touch with Gasly once or something like that and got a 5-second? I don't think Stroll ever got a big penalty.
I don't think he got... I don't remember him getting a penalty for the Ocon one.
Yeah, I don't think Stroll got any big penalties this year. Surprising, actually. Nedzo's prediction was Lewis Hamilton would get the worst penalty of the year, the biggest, whatever, the most dramatic. Yukari and Peter both said Hadjar, and Yukari also said Max Verstappen, which, I mean, Spain, yeah, that probably should have been a race ban.
I suppose Lewis had one of the most embarrassing ones because he got the grid penalty for Monza for going too fast on the formation lap, or he ignoring yellow flags on the way to the grid in Zandvoort, wasn't it? Oh yeah, Mexico, just cutting corners. Yeah.
Well, so there's the worst penalty of the year. Then we also made some predictions for the most ignorant celebrity interview around an F1 race weekend. This is a weird category. Yukari said it would be some model or some content creator, not really elaborating further. Peter predicted either Mr. Beast or Taylor Swift. I don't think either got interviewed. I think Nedzo got a good shout. Nedzo predicted the Rizzler, and I think he did get interviewed, didn't he? And Sabrina Carpenter is what Nedzo said. Ciaron said that Albon is a big fan of Chappelle Roan, and she would be interviewed and would be completely clueless, so that she would be the most ignorant celebrity interview around an F1 race weekend. And I subverted the question, and I said the most ignorant celebrity interview around an F1 race weekend would be Danica Patrick, but not as the interviewee, but as the interviewer. I'm not. Did she even do interviews this year? Was she in the post-race shows?
She did lots of punditry, yeah.
Okay. I didn't watch the post-race shows this year anymore, so I don't actually know.
I think Sabrina Carpenter was at Vegas. I don't remember her getting interviewed on the grids, but I think she was one of the celebs there.
No.
I think whoever was doing the interviews with the drivers after Vegas, that actor from Avatar, apparently, that was just horrible. Definitely him, especially because it was the post-race interview where you usually have like David Coulthard or someone like that, and then they just throw in that random actor who has no idea who anybody is and what the championship is doing and whatever.
I'm surprised that regarding this category, no one predicted anyone involved with the F1 movie. Like, surely there would be some celebrity around the F1 movie who would be part of the movie but still be incredibly ignorant to the actual F1 thing. But that didn't really happen, did it?
I mean, the thing is, Brad Pitt isn't that ignorant of it. Like, he seems to take it very seriously. And I've forgotten the name of Joshua something that played the...
Damson Idris.
Damson Idris, that's the one, yeah. He did a little bit in Vegas, I think, but otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. The next category was the most obnoxious pre-race show, and 4 people agreed on Miami, so that's just that.
But it was actually good. It was the Lego cars, wasn't it?
Oh, that was really fun. Yeah,
true.
That was actually really good. I think I can't remember what they did with Vegas because I didn't see it live. That would have been something annoying.
Yeah, in Brazil they did the pedal cars, didn't they?
Yes, and Sainz and Albon, they went rogue and they went down the old Interlagos layout or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't Abu Dhabi, they did a bunch of crap because it was the title decider, but it was a massive damp squib of a race.
Yeah. Anyway, let's wrap up this segment with the final prediction, which is actually a good one again. Good category. The final category. Biggest dumpster fire team of the year. And like I already teased at the beginning of this segment, No one said Alpine. Why did no one say Alpine? Come on, man. So Nedzo said Sauber. Somebody said that Sauber already had imploded, already was the biggest dumpster fire before the year, so that there wouldn't be much left to burn. But yeah, Sauber was a prediction. Peter predicted Red Bull. Yukari said Ferrari. Ciaron said Haas would be the biggest dumpster fire team of the year. And I said Ferrari because Lewis and Leclerc and Clown Show and everything. So there's that. 4 different predictions. Who did end up being the biggest dumpster fire team of the year?
It has to be Alpine, but Ferrari's close.
I mean, I think the ones who predicted Red Bull and Ferrari, they had very solid evidence to make this prediction, and it does actually came true because Ferrari continues saying, the car is just we're gonna fix it, and people in Italy wait until September, and then Vassar said, "Oh no, we stopped developing in April," to everybody amazement. Red Bull has got Horner fired, now has got Marco fired, and it's quite a mess at Red Bull. It's just Nedzo is right. Alpine was able to outdo both of them with how much of a mess the team was, just purely on bad performances.
I'll tell you what, I can't wait for Flav next year. If Alpine's competitive, Flav is going to be a lot more involved than he has been this year.
I'm just shocked he wasn't in the Epstein files, to be honest. But,
oh, great.
Yeah.
Are they out yet?
Yeah, they are.
Oh.
It's not very
barcodes, basically. Just
it's all censored, so there's nothing. But I was like, he is absolutely going to be in there, but there's nothing on him.
Nothing visible. Well, what else was more comments? Who was the biggest dumpster fire team of the year? Motorsport Madness, Josh, Ciaron, you guys.
I think probably Ferrari takes that cake. But then again, if you look back at Formula One history, Ferrari have had many instances of having 1 or 2 really terrible seasons, followed by seasons of greatness and success. So I think for a lot of people, me included, I don't see this as completely disastrous. I think Ferrari will sit back and say, right, no more. It's forward from now on. And you look at their hypercar teams, every other racing series that they're competing in is going absolutely fantastic. Yet their Formula One, again, is just not going very well. But I think Ferrari have got the know-how and they're strong enough to really use this season as a sort of trampoline to really propel themselves right up. But again, Ferrari this year have been just, it's a shame. I mean, myself, I've never really been a Hamilton fan. I felt so sorry for him this year. Really have, because he has been trying, Leclerc has been trying, and then they have been trying. But I don't think they'll be too disappointed because it is the end of an era in Formula One. We are going into a new set of regs next year. And I think that's really what they were looking at this year. So I don't think anyone really were too disappointed. And the other team that weren't really spectacular was Alpine, but I haven't really got too much to say about them.
Yeah, it depends upon your perspective when it comes to who's been the bigger dumpster fire. The expectation on both teams is different. Ferrari have the weight of the world behind them because they are Ferrari, but like you said, they're a peculiar team. 1979, they win the world championship with Jody Scheckter. They were, I wouldn't say they were just about the team at the time. They were the world champions. The next year, they had a car so bad, the defending world champion couldn't qualify it and chased them into retirement. So it's been going on for years. They lost this 1951. They lost that championship, second world championship, because they turned up to the last round with the wrong wheels. So, they always provide a little something to make you just go, seriously, how? But I think the most jarring thing out of Ferrari was just hearing some of the attitude out of that team, almost as if, well, we're all fine. This is the drivers. They got to, sort themselves out, basically. It seemed key personnel within the team, not quite, can't remember exactly who, but there seemed to be some resistance to the feedback issued from Lewis and Charles. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't really allow for much growth if you're going to be shunning the feedback of those two drivers. So you compare that to what's going on at Alpine, where Alpine seems to just be falling back and back and back and had no answer for how to get back. Could they be priming up for a better 2026? I don't know, but I think it's just more jarring hearing some of the stuff coming out of Maranello right now, where it seems that they're kind of just stuck in their ways almost. And you got to wonder, well, what's it going to take, and what's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? Because at some stage, it's going to be, literally lifetimes away from when they last had, trophies in their cabinet.
I'd say it was definitely Ferrari, because they managed to make me feel pity for Lewis Hamilton, and that alone just deserved the award, because I really did come around and feel sorry for him, just looking at him being this completely lifeless, just sad human being who just has to endure this season driving for Ferrari. And I mean, Leclerc has been this way for some time, but seeing Lewis within a season go from whatever he was at Mercedes to this really rather washed up self, it's just very disappointing. And so just on that basis, I would give this award to Ferrari.
Yeah. I just want to add something quickly. So, first thing is to the Alpine comments that were made. I think we need to keep in context that and remember that Alpine have purposely abandoned their 2025 car pretty early, right? Like they clearly said that one of the goals of the season was to have the updates done and dusted early and then pivot to 26. That's why even when they brought little updates, they were just so ineffective. So Alpine are hoping that this total, underperformance, if you want to call it by them, pays off next year. Because apparently, behind the scenes, they've been doing incredible work, or incredible amount of work on the 26 car. So I think in that, if you look at that, a team that does that is going to have a pretty poor, incumbent season. So I'm going to give it to Alpine with Ferrari second. But on the points that were just made by CZ and Josh, Ferrari, we know, always underperform relative to their budget in recent years. And, they have this dysfunctional way of working. It's no secret. But I also have to say that two things. Hamilton underestimated the challenge. And I think people are also too quick to dismiss Hamilton because he clearly didn't have a car that suited his driving style, right? Like, let's get down to it. You can call him washed. You can say all these things. He had no confidence in the car. So who's to say that if Ferrari do listen to him and build a car that actually suits him better, he won't be up there matching Leclerc? Because for the record, and I'm not a super fan of any of the drivers right now. I'm pretty neutral. I would say that Hamilton still has the ability to be super competitive, and that China sprint race was a glimpse of that. So I think Hamilton had a poor season. I didn't feel sorry for him because this is Formula One. When you switch a team and your teammate is one of the quickest drivers and has been at a team for 7 years, you need to know what you're getting yourself into, and it's part of the game. And he's never had to do that to that extent, in my opinion. I mean, he went to a great team in Mercedes. He had a season in 2013 where Rosberg won more races than him. And then he was fine after that. He did fine. At McLaren, he had the most prep of any rookie in history. I stand by that. So that wasn't really a true rookie season, even though he was spectacular. So all in all, I see the argument for Ferrari being a dumpster fire. They in some ways were, but I think Alpine were the true dumpster fire. They purposely sacrificed their 25 in the hopes they will have a brilliant 26. will they have a brilliant 26? Who knows? It's hard to have any confidence with their recent track record, but we'll see.
What you just said, Ciaron, makes me think about other two teams, because clearly Alpine and Ferrari started the year below expectations. And so their team principal said, we started badly. Why try to fix something that is born wrong? We just focus entirely on 2026. And that is mainly the reason why now we say Ferrari and Alpine are the dumpster fires of the year. But we had two other teams who started the year below expectations, and those were Sauber and Aston Martin. All these four teams have something in common. They are teams that are trying to establish a new structure themselves, new stuff. Sauber is transitioning to being the Audi team, and so Binotto came in halfway through last year, and then more stuff. Aston Martin is settling with the new infrastructures and new personnel. Alpine has had Flavio Briatore coming in, dropping the Renault engine to go to a new engine. And then Ferrari, they are still waiting for Vasseur to settle everything to finally have the best team on the grid. And these four teams had this in common, but then they took different choices. Ferrari and Alpine decided to bail on this year entirely. Instead, Sauber and Aston Martin decided to double down on this year to fix the car because they wanted to make sure to establish that their current team, infrastructure, personnel, whatever, is capable, is ready to produce a strong car, the right car. And so we really have to see next year what is going to happen. Because if next year we see Audi and Aston Martin being very competitive, then the right thing to do was not to bail on 2025, but was to establish that the team is right, that it is capable of being competitive. If instead Ferrari and Alpine outclass Audi and Aston Martin because they had more time and effort put into the 2026 car, then theirs is going to be the right gamble. So really, to see the difference between these two choices, we have to see next year. So maybe just saying they are dumpster fires, yes, they are dumpster fires this year, but if that means they are going to be the best team next year, it's well worth it.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And that's how I looked at this season. Every time you saw Haas or Sauber or Aston bring an update, it was like, okay, well, that could have gone to 26. You've actually allocated resources. You've made a chess move. That's all I looked at it as. And the only problem is that, do we really have any confidence in Alpine? Like, okay, David Sanchez, ex-Lotus, all of that. But I don't have any confidence in that team. Like, to me, I remember the saga of 2023 testing where they did like 50 laps and everyone was like, they have a rocket ship from another planet and they were just awful. So I'm not convinced they don't deserve that yet. But yeah, go ahead.
About Alpine, instead, I remember 2022. They went into 2021 putting everything for the new regulations. And they had the new team manager, Laurent Rossi, who made a mess of everything, okay? He got Ocon on a 3 years contract because he had a few good races, then decided he wanted to hustle Alonso's for the salary, and ended up losing both Alonso and Piastri. So, the team had a bad leader, but still for the 2022 regulations, they started with a very good car. It was the fourth best car, and that was despite an engine which was 15 horsepower down or 30 on every other engine. So they already lost 3 tenths of a second out of the engine alone. And they were competitive, the car at the start of the year. They were at least as good as Mercedes. So then clearly it didn't develop as well because they already had a better finished product. But, Alpine started the year well, the new regulations, in spite of bad management. So if Briatore instead is a good manager and fixes a lot of stuff, maybe only the management was the thing to fix at Renault, at Alpine. And then if Briatore is the right fix, then I think so. I think that Alpine is ready for the new regulations.
There's also a case we made that if a team sacrifices a season, and even does, if they do make a jump, that based on what's been said before, there's how do I best put this? Well, I'm basically just trying to make a point about Haas and Sauber between 2021 and 2022, who sacrificed 2021 without Haas without any development whatsoever, and Sauber only brought like one minor upgrade or something, and then they were also moving on to 2022. And they both started 2022 very strongly, with Bottas constantly in P6 at the start of 2022 in that Sauber, and ahead of the Mercedes. And what else? Haas, yes. Kevin Magnussen P5 in the first race in 2022, and both teams just faded away after that. I mean, they had a as the season went on, they disappeared. So even after sacrificing a year and hoping to gamble everything on getting a head start in the new regulations, that head start didn't amount to anything, and they faded away because they did not upgrade their processes and everything, and because the factory and whatever it was not up to par. And that's exactly the struggle that Alpine may well run into. Even if they start the season strongly, do they have the infrastructure? Do they have the operation to get the whole thing, to keep that level relative to the other teams? Because there's just no, ultimately, I don't see any universe where Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, where if those four teams apply themselves, they can't outdevelop every other team on the grid easily, even if they start at a deficit. I mean, we've seen McLaren come from back markers to front runners in a single season. They started out as the worst team in 2023, was it? And you know where they ended up? Podiums. So,
Yeah.
there's that. I think we should just move on to going team by team. And I think we're already talking about McLaren, so take it away.
Yeah. I mean, this is the benchmark car in Formula One. It's been the benchmark car since the Miami Grand Prix of 2024. It didn't have a discernible weakness, in my opinion, and that's what really allowed them to cover up for some of their drivers' mistakes. And don't get me wrong, both their drivers are very quick, but credit to Rob Marshall, Peter Prodromo. They built the fastest car in Formula One. And, I think they're well suited for the regulations. They've proven that they know how to develop a car. They know how to adjust their car to the regulations. And I actually think they start the season as favorites next year. And I think they genuinely did a great job from the engineering standpoint this year. They really did just bring good updates. I mean, okay, they had that little blip in Vegas, but this is a team that on the engineering front runs really well. What they need to improve on is the drivers need to improve, and strategy sometimes was a little odd. Like sometimes they didn't split strategies when they should have. Sometimes they gave up a podium unnecessarily. It's the operational and the driving aspect that still needs to improve. But the engineering front of that team is mighty, totally imperious. So I'll stop there, but I think McLaren were the standout team in terms of car performance and engineering. But actually, they still have to improve a lot in their strategic department, and I think the drivers can still get better, especially Piastri. He did an amazing job relative to the lack of experience he has to Norris, but then he clearly showed his inexperience by just dropping off in the final quarter of the season. He's got to improve on that. Because I think he has more potential as a driver than Norris, even if Norris is currently the superior driver.
I think I've got to agree with most of what Karen said there. On the engineering front, McLaren are pretty much, at least nowadays, impervious. Red Bull might come slightly close, but I think with the loss of Newey, with how that team's going in terms of personnel, it might fall by the wayside. I think earlier on I was doing some quick calculations, and this is one of only 5 seasons in Formula One history where the champion was not one of the top 3 drivers in the season, in my opinion. So obviously, for me, Norris was behind Verstappen, Russell, and Leclerc this year. The only other years where the champion wasn't top three, in my opinion, were actually there were 4 seasons which were in ways consecutive to each other. So there's 2008 and 2009, and 1996 and 1997. Both of my those 4 seasons, in my opinion, the champion wasn't one of the top three drivers that year. And yeah, the strategy, Karen said, yeah, the strategy was off Qatar. Like, what were they doing in Qatar? They should have at least split the strategy there. They should have done something that was a bit different. And maybe, but at the end of the day, they won the Constructors' Championship. I think that's all McLaren really care about. As long as they don't completely screw up the driver's title, I think they could have lost the title to Verstappen even. And I think Zach Brown, Andrea Stella would have played it down because at the end of the day, all they care about is the constructors. I think that's the case, and I think that's probably why they got a bit lackluster and a bit haphazard in terms of strategy. Because by the time that Verstappen was back in the title fight, they'd already wrapped it up, and so they didn't really care about the drivers. Or they did; it would be good for optics, but I don't think it was the be all and end all. So yeah, I'd say that McLaren, they do need to improve operationally. Whether that means they need to start looking for replacements for Norris or Piastri, I don't think that's necessary. I think they can still win titles with them, especially if they do cut out their mistakes. Piastri, especially. I think Norris has pretty much hit the peak of his powers because he's in his eighth or ninth season now. He has hit his. He's not getting any better, I don't think. Piastri can improve his efforts on low grip circuits. He can sort of eke out little advantages, but unless they just want to have a guaranteed chance at the title, they can stick with them. They just need to work on their mistakes. They need to work on operational errors. But then again, if Piastri keeps getting treated the way he does, where papaya rules, although they aren't completely geared towards Norris, they are definitely biasing him slightly. I think that he might end up leaving the team, and then there could be an avenue for a Verstappen or a Leclerc or a Russell to finally jump into the best car on the grid. Well, Leclerc or Russell to jump on the best car on the grid, and then they can maybe show up Norris. So I suppose there's that. But yeah, McLaren, they are a shell of a team that on the outside is very good, but on the inside, when you dig deeper, it's a bit less ideal.
Can I just quickly ask Nedzo, who are the 3 drivers that you put above 08 Hamilton?
Let me just double check.
Because Raikkonen and Alonso, I assume. And then are you putting
let me
Massa
have a look,
above him?
because this is for a future video idea. I put Kubica, Alonso, and Raikkonen.
I see. Okay, so Kubica is the 3rd one. That's the one I was wondering. Thank you.
I would add Heidfeld to that.
Heidfeld's also up there.
But yeah, with McLaren this year, I think this is the first example of where they won the constructors' title with 6 rounds to go, but the drivers' title still went to the final, but not between their drivers, with someone else in the mix. Like, that's never happened before, and that kind of gives you a really good idea of just how much they screwed it up towards the end, and also just how good Max was. And again, when you see, as you know, small plug, when you see it in reverse, and Max has by Baku, he's got a lead of like 100 points in the championship or something, and then he ends up losing it right at the end. Is that it was just a really insane swing. I mean, with something like Qatar, they could have split that, but then in their eyes that probably violates papaya rules because you're favouring one driver over the other, because they knew that something like that is obviously going to work for one of them and not the other one, and maybe that was why it was the papaya rules thing that really messed them up because it's just you can't ever be equal and fair with everyone, but also because it never came out looking equal and fair because it always seemed to favour Lando.
Yeah, just get rid of them. Just get rid of papaya rules. If something happens where a driver loses fairness, like an engine retirement or a slightly slow pit stop, that happens. Like the truly great drivers, your Senna, Prost, Schumacher, Verstappen, Hamilton, they aren't pulling. I mean, Hamilton did in Hungary 2017, I suppose, but they aren't pulling over for a teammate when they're fighting for a title.
They do need to be more aggressive, I think, less friendly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oscar, Lando just crashed. Could you please just slam it into the wall now? In fairness.
I think one of the reasons this title was kind of empty, seeing Norris win it, is does anyone here think Norris made a step up from what we saw the last years, 2023. Does anybody here think Norris was visibly better? Because in my opinion, compared to last year, he maybe made less of a mess of things, less bad starts and other stuff. But, at the same time, compared to last year, he also had a more dominant car, which makes it easier to make less mess. So one of the things I think people can't pinpoint, and it's the reason why they aren't really impressed by Lando, is that he wasn't any better from what he was last year or 2023. He was the same. He simply had a better car.
I think one thing to bear in mind is that last year Piastri wasn't a factor. Now this year he was. That I think especially at the start of the season when Verstappen was out of it, that put a lot more pressure on Lando. I think that also we didn't see the peaks in 2024 that we saw with Lando, and the lows last year were kind of more pronounced, and the average performance was more pronounced. Like for a good amount of races, he was just maintaining the gap to Verstappen rather than increasing or reducing the gap because he was chasing. I would say that 2025 is definitely a better season for Norris. I think it's pretty quantifiable. The peaks were higher, the average was better, and the lows, like, yes, he crashed in Jeddah qualifying and he made a mistake in Canada. But even then, like, I think I'd rather be chipping away at the block rather than doing what he did in 2024, which was just stagnating and then at the end of the season falling back so that you eventually lose points to Verstappen after being in the best car for two-thirds of a year.
I think for a lot of people, they don't really see anything really spectacular with Lando. And I'm not saying this criticizing him, saying, oh, he's not deserving, because he's a deserving champion. He's won it, and well done, mate. But I think it's something like 70% car and 30% driver. And we've seen it, in years gone by. He just hasn't really done too much. You look at Verstappen and he's got many, many highlights of races. I mean, you think of Imola Turn 1 this year, it was just like, whoa. But yeah, it's just not a very spectacular driver. I'm seeing that in a few years' time that will improve. But again, when you've got a consistent car that just gives you results, that's what you need in Formula One to succeed. You don't, it's not necessarily the fastest car in qualifying or fastest car in race pace. It is just a good, consistent car that's comfortable to drive. But again, McLaren just needs to sort out their inner workings, be more aggressive, less friendly, and the whole it's just the World Championship hotline thing kind of really emphasised that it's just really all, we're all for one and one for all kind of thing, when it just should really stop and just say, right, we need to stop and just let the drivers fight it out, because they're both very capable of driving a car. And I'm a big fan of Piastri over Lando. And it was a bit of a shame to see him just drop off. Whether there was stuff going on behind the scenes, we don't know. But again, I think, it was mainly the car that propelled Lando to his championship. If we put any other driver in that car, we probably would have seen a very similar result or very close. But yeah, McLaren again, the best cars, not the best run team. So next year, who knows what will happen? We're going into a season of complete unknowns. So we can't really predict. But yeah, overall, well done to Lando. So if you're commenting thinking that I'm anti-Lando, I am not. I'm just saying, it's when you need to have the best car to win a championship. That's what I'm saying. And he did.
I remember at Goodwood, I annoyed a friend of yours that I didn't realise was a Lando fan because I said he has a lentil for a brain.
It's all right. Me and him have daily arguments because I tell him that it's not spectacular, and he tries to punch me as a result. But it's all right.
But yeah, I mean, he's got his title. He's not going to get any more. He can enjoy this. He can be the Damon Hill or the Jenson Button of his generation. And yeah, congratulations to him. Second team would be Mercedes. As it is, we've talked a lot about Antonelli already and his kind of up and down season as a rookie. We haven't really mentioned George much. He had another very good, very consistent season and got 2 wins and generally outdrove the car. And he was a bit of a P4 merchant, but overall a mostly very strong season, certainly a bit more stable, I guess, or not so depressing as when Lewis was there, because Lewis's last year wasn't brilliant. But yeah, Kyron, what do you think of Mercedes?
Yeah, and this will probably be my last contribution today, but he was the second best driver in Formula One. He was a massively difficult benchmark for his rookie teammate, and he's actually proven that he is capable of consistently extracting a lot of performance, winning in a car that maybe wasn't the best in races like Canada and Singapore. And I think his race management improved as his tire usage. Sometimes in the past, he's been criticized for his tire management. He really improved that this season. And if Mercedes were capable of podiums, it was always George that was the threat. So that's a very good sign. And I think, honestly, if Mercedes can deliver him a car that's even equal to the top team, George Russell will do the business. He's the only driver I have confidence in right now that if you gave him a car similar to Max, he'd actually make a fight of it. Alonso, Hamilton are also in that discussion, as is Leclerc, but it's a bigger question mark for some reason for me. I think Alonso is in there. It's so hard to tell with Stroll as a benchmark, but it's really Russell who has that consistent elite qualifying pace, makes so little mistakes, brings the car home when he needs to, and he's not afraid to go at Verstappen in the media either if he has to. So he had an amazing season. And I think that also, like I said, in spite of what was, I think, not the greatest car, even though it finished second, it was a distant second, let's be honest. It wasn't really close to the McLaren. And I think in light of that, we have to just look at the season as like a part of the learning curve for Mercedes here as they prep for 2026, and also look at Antonelli's season in light of him being up against what was really the second best driver in Formula One. So both drivers were impressive in their own way. One of them is learning. One of them is at his absolute peak. This will be, when we look back on George Russell's career, this will be peak Russell when we're debating it in 10 years or whatever. This will be peak Russell. And I think Mercedes, if they know that, I think they'll be happy, because if they build a car that's fast, if they build a car that's competitive, unlike this season, they have a driver who can deliver the goods. And some people will worry that if Lewis leaves, they don't have a star. They have a star. And I would even say he's a superstar right now. And Antonelli is getting better by the day. So this team is well positioned for title fights going forward. I have a lot of confidence in both drivers, and surely they'll have a better season in the near future than this one. But 2 wins, that was great. Great trajectory for Antonelli, who started to match Russell later in the season. This is a very strong team, and I have high hopes for them going into 26. So I'll leave it there. And great to be here today with everybody. And I'll head out now. But thanks again, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Cheers. On the subject of George Russell, I would argue that, especially with him being the second best driver of the season, which I can fully agree on, I think there's a number of drivers who in that McLaren would have probably won the title with multiple races to go. And he's one of them. And Leclerc is one of them. And if you remember the comparison of performance between Sainz and Norris, I would also argue that Sainz would easily be one of them. There's no way Sainz doesn't take that title with at least 1 or 2 races to go in the McLaren. I don't know. To me, it was just painful to watch those 2 guys stumble to a title. And here's one thing I wanted to ask you guys about, because I'm not sure if this is my memory playing tricks on me or if this is actually something that happened. I seem to remember that before this season, McLaren announced that if by race 9 or 10 or something, the driver who would be ahead, they would back for the title and treat as number 1 driver. And that ended up being Piastri at the time. And then that didn't happen. They gave team orders afterwards, 3rd races, where Piastri had to give up position because Lando had an had an oopsie. So, am I misremembering that, or did that happen? Because I seem to remember that McLaren did say that they would back the driver who would be ahead, didn't they? And yeah,
There seemed to be a lot of goalpost shifting with regards to, some of the stuff going on. I'm not saying that there was nefarious stuff going on, but it was a little bit inconsistent on that front. And it just seemed a lot of the time. And again, I'm not suggesting there was bias or whatever the hell. I'm just blurting it out that the inconsistencies definitely seemed to hamper Piastri more. But it's remarkable, isn't it? Even going into whether we're talking about Red Bull, Mercedes, or whatever, a constant in each of those times we talk about someone else, it always goes back to the whole McLaren thing of, oh, this driver would have won on that McLaren, which is kind of, speaks volumes about what was going on in that team. So would Russell have won the championship in that McLaren? I think it goes without saying, because aside from the fact that George is fast, and he proved that this year, his mental fortitude, especially going up against opponents, he's not afraid to joust. And we've seen that, and he will politicize as much as he can, and he seems to be able to get his head around it quite efficiently. He would have walked, whether it was Oscar or Lando, but now that Lando's got his championship, would you not think, well, maybe now that he's got that championship, he probably will have a bit more of an edge to him now. He's got that experience. He's probably a lot more at peace with himself, a lot more secure, and that can open up, the door for even more performance, or maybe it won't. Who knows? But I just find it remarkable that whenever we go and talk about someone having a good season, it always goes to, okay, well, how soon would they have won the championship in that McLaren? So, yeah, Nedzo?
George Russell nowadays, he reminds me of peak Jenson Button, like 2004 Jenson Button, 2011 Jenson Button, where he's just always there. He might not be the outright fastest in one lap pace. To be fair, Russell has a better qualifying form than Button ever did. But in terms of race pace, he will just deliver 99.9% of the time. He won't, let's say, do what Verstappen's doing, where he outperforms what the car should be capable of, but he will deliver to what the car is capable of, like 95, 96% of the time. And that's what you need from a driver. That's the reason why he would beat Norris or Piastri in a title fight. Because while Norris or Piastri makes a mistake every third or fourth race, Russell will just quietly accrue the points. I think that, especially against Norris, the qualifying battle would be close. But I think in terms of racecraft, in terms of race pace, in terms of race consistency, that Norris might win 5 or 6 races throughout a year, maybe even 7, 8, 9, 10. But the lows would be much lower than what Russell would ever do. And as for Antonelli, I think that as we saw, his peaks were incredibly high. We saw in Brazil, we saw in Canada what he was capable of, maybe even Vegas as well. This is what I say about drivers who have high potential that aren't necessarily showing it, or have things like we talk about how Hamilton has potential to win a title. Apart from one sprint race where he managed to get pole position and didn't need to do anything to win the race. That for me, I know we're going to get into Hamilton later, but the difference between Antonelli and Hamilton, Antonelli showed a couple of flashes of brilliance, and that for me shows that he has potential to be great if he can keep that, if he can just improve that consistency. Whereas with Hamilton, for example, or other drivers who have shown maybe a flash of brilliance this season, I don't see it in them.
With Russell, I think he's really taken a step this year once again. Like, he's always been a rather convincing driver, pretty much since at least 2021. He's been really convincing, when he was often called Mr. Saturday for dragging that Williams into Q3. But this year he's really taken another step, because last year there were a few occasions where, yes, he was already doing the big talk on the microphone in the interviews and smack talking Max, but then he didn't quite back it up on track and was kind of still not quite there. But this year he didn't. Well, he was there many times, but he still had more off weekends where he wasn't quite on the pace. And this year it's been different. This year, I only remember one real off weekend, but that's just because I barely remember anything of this season. But the only off weekend I really remember from Russell was when inexplicably he was slower than the Ferrari in Abu Dhabi, which I still don't understand where Leclerc's pace came from and Russell just was nowhere in the race. But that's the only real off weekend. This year, he's really not just done the talking in the interviews, he's done the talking on track. And this year is basically the season where George Russell convinced me that in the right car, equal cars, championship fight, he can come out on top against most drivers on the grid, if not almost all of them. And I want to see him in a title fight against Max Verstappen, because that's just going to be fireworks. And I'm not sure if we're going to see that, because I'm not sure if Red Bull powertrains really have been cooking with the engine, considering their new engine manufacturer entirely. But I don't know how much support they're getting from Ford. Maybe there's going to be something there. And that's still too early to talk about that subject. But yeah, that's just my thoughts about Mercedes. So yeah.
If there was an award for Diva on the radio, that would definitely go to Russell for his performance in Mexico, which is probably I don't know what word you would describe it, but it would definitely be that of all radio messages. And yeah, I think it's just very convincing how Russell just managed to knuckle down, and he doesn't have the car. He's never had the car to really compete for even wins, to be honest, because there's always a bigger fish in terms of car performance. And he still always manages to just knuckle down, get on with it, and just get consistent results. And again, Antonelli just had that awful European leg where he retired 18th, retired 16th, 10th, 16th, 9th. So it was just a complete dumpster fire for them. And I mean, let's be real, they won this Constructors' Champ. They got second because of Tsunoda. So this clearly was the third fastest car and just had better drivers. So I'm not sure. I'm also not sure how much development they put into this car sort of past the summer break. Because if they did, then, maybe that wasn't resources best spent. Yes, go on, Ace.
I mean, Russell going on the radio and then being a diva is nothing new. It has happened basically throughout his Mercedes years. It makes me wonder, because everybody seems to think he at McLaren would have won the title and sooner than what Norris managed to. And it makes me think, if Russell were at McLaren, how would papaya rules work? Would they even work? Because I can imagine the first thing goes wrong for Russell and he upturns mountains and seas because he has to pitch worldwide on the team radio. It makes me think, because there's always the final question, when a driver actually gets a dominant car to win the championship, does he get better? Is he able to put everything that he has together to have a better season than ever? Or do his lackings and weaknesses start to become more apparent if he has a dominant car? And so I think the question is, if Russell were on the McLaren, would he stop wasting his breath on the team radio and just get his head down and win every race? Or would he start to get emotional and compromise himself uselessly? I think that's always the final question.
Okay, and I guess also the final comment. No one wants to add anything to Mercedes?
I got very much to say about them myself.
All I'll say is it was funny hearing Russell say, "Marcus, I've got a car up my arse." Oh, that was quite funny.
Because you mentioned in passing about engines for next year with Red Bull and Mercedes. Aren't they the ones that are currently in trouble about some stroke ratio on their engines, which is like apparently illegal or whatever? That seems to have come up.
There was a protest. There was another protest. 3 teams made a demonstration to the FIA on how the compression ratio of the engine could be tricked, how that something there could be tricked around to go back up to the 18-1 ratio that it is currently, and while only 16-1 is allowed next season. The three teams that launched that demonstrated this were, I think, Ferrari, Honda, and Audi. And the team suspected of, basically that trickery with the engine, who they think might produce an engine with that trickery and whom they are trying to basically prevent using that are obviously then Red Bull powertrains and Mercedes. But I'll be honest, I have zero expectations for Red Bull powertrains. I think they'll probably be the worst engine or joint worst engine with Audi, but that's just side note there.
I'm left wondering how they even know about this, because unless we think that all three of those teams have had people leave and they're like, actually, I hate you, so I'm going to tell our competitors that we're doing something illegal and try and get you to change your engine.
But I mean, there's always a constant dialogue about the engines and regulations with the FIA and teams submitting documents. Is this allowed? Is this not allowed? And I mean, obviously, teams would see some of what other teams are doing there because I suppose, I'm not sure how much they would see, but I think there would be enough dialogue that some teams could get suspicious of other teams, and I think there's a lot more talk between the engine manufacturers than the public really likely knows about.
Well, since you mentioned Red Bull, I guess we'll go to them next. As it is, again, we talked a lot about Max. I mean, a sensational season. He did crack in a few places, but generally absolutely supreme driving. The team itself, though, was kind of... There were a lot of problems. I mean, getting rid of Horner and of Lorenz Mecki's, things worked well at first, and then it got a bit rocky, and now Marco's gone, so the dream team has disappeared, and Tsunoda was just absolutely abysmal. Like, it just summed it up at the last race, when the best he could do when impersonating Checo was hold him up for not even one corner and just get himself a penalty. And that's his, contribution to trying to get Max the championship.
He held on to Norris for a bit longer than that.
But
he backed him up through like a bunch of corners, didn't he? The whole slow section of the track, no?
Not really. He just passed him on the back straight on his first attempt after being pushed off track by Yuki.
Yes, but Norris caught him like half a lap before that, didn't he?
Maybe.
No.
I mean, it made no difference in the end, but
yeah, it didn't make much difference. It didn't make a difference for Tsunoda, I guess. Even his own team criticized him after the race, so that was fun.
Yeah.
Oh, Red Bull. That was a brutal season to watch. I would say that Red Bull were vindicated in firing Horner to some degree, and Mekis has done a good job, especially helping bring the team back to the front in the second half of the year, really getting that team to joint best car at least towards the final third of the season. So Mekis good. Lawson, they should have never replaced Checo with Lawson. They were right to replace Lawson with Yuki Tsunoda, I believe, in my opinion. I'm not sure if Lawson... The thing is, they said about Lawson at the time, and they didn't take that decision lightly, they said he was basically spiraling. And that I don't think that would have stopped by itself. And the gap was just insane between them. So I think for Lawson, the best they could have done was to demote him to Minardi, and basically where he was able to... Well, he was able to recapture his form and have a good season. Did he score more points than Yuki? I think he did. I'm not sure. He did score a fair amount of points.
He did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Yuki Tsunoda, on the other hand, I mean, he was closer to Max than any other teammates that they had on the table would have been. But I mean, the reality is that they should have signed Sainz or should have never fired Checo, in my opinion. Like, they had Sainz right there.
Man.
And Checo,
like, how many drivers have they been through? How many drivers have they burned through? And of them, okay, so the rot started with Gasly, which, I know, the rot sounds harsh, but it was so bad. Like, he was lapped at the Hungaroring that year without mitigation by Max. Max lapped him with no mitigation, which was when they were like, right, so we got Kvyat here. Let's not get him and draft an Albon. And Albon showed some promise initially. Then he got absolutely incinerated the next year. Then came Checo, and you might argue to some extent that the car masked where he was relative to Max, because who cares if he's a second off, if the car's so good that he gets second or third anyway. Then of course, the last couple of years of Checo, when the competition closed up, it was becoming more apparent. Then they drafted in Liam, and they said, "Oh, he has a higher performance ceiling." Probably, it's just like, even if that's the case, the guy is still greener than goose shit. He hasn't raced on half the tracks, and you're gonna put him on there? Okay, good luck, master plan. And of course, that fell apart quite spectacularly, and it's the worst goddamn thing to come out of New Zealand after my hair. And then they drafted in Yuki, which is what it should have been from the start. And there was some initial promise. Japan practices looked good. It's just like, okay, cool. They found their sweet spot. Then he got out qualified by Liam. It's just like, Jesus, are we going through this again? And yep. Long before the season was over, they already decided to send him to the glue factory. Now they're bringing in Hadjar, and I don't know. It's a new set of regulations. It's a new hierarchy in the house. It could yield a change. I don't know, but I find it hard to criticize anybody who's in that second seat, because it's not just this one guy who's come in and stunk up the joint. It's been multiple drivers, and those who went on to do other stuff, even before, like, people were clamoring Red Bull to sign Checo in 2020 after, the season he had at Team Stroll, and they signed him, and, people knew what he did before. Albon, I almost said signs there, Jesus. Albon and Gasly, after they left Red Bull, have become solid commodities in their team. So, and we knew what Yuki did beforehand. So it's a weird thing that seat bamboozles everyone. It makes us just blankly forget what they do beforehand. So I find it so hard to criticize Yuki, I guess. I think it's more exemplary of just what we've got in Max. He may not be everyone's cup of tea, but the fact he almost won the championship, and he said it was his most complete season ever, and you can't disagree with that, because that was just, barring the head loss in Barcelona, but there's 23 other damn races. It was just momentous to watch. And it's just like, imagine if he makes this, a three-way title fight at the end, and he damn well almost wins. Like, he could take this in good stead. Like, it was a damn good season for the team itself. I don't know. I'm on the fence as to whether Laurent Mackies could be the guy to steer the team into the future. There was definitely rocky times for the team this year. Who knows? Next year is critical for their team and their future, because it'll determine their trajectory for the next couple of years and whether they're even going to keep Max.
I'd say I agree with most of the points that people have said so far. There are a couple of things I want to say. People have praised Laurent Mackies for his car development. I think the point that does need to be made is that, are we going to praise him for developing that car when McLaren weren't developing at all? That's one thing I would say, that if we're going to praise him for, obviously the team needs the way that Verstappen brought his way into the title battle, as a collective, the team can probably be praised for how they handled it. But I think that by the benchmark of the fact that McLaren weren't developing, or he's definitely not to the level that Red Bull were, not even close, I think that needs to be taken into account. And I'll get into the teammates now. Tsunoda can be given some benefit of the doubt with the how narrow the setup window is, and how the car isn't designed for Max, but it benefits him a lot greater than another car would. And but the thing was, even Checo at his worst in the second 2/3 of 2024, when the car wasn't downright that wasn't the outright best, he still had standout performances. Baku, he came out of nowhere and was on for a great result until science took him out. Whereas Sonoda, we saw nothing, and I mean nothing. There was no like, oh, he qualified. He qualified. Well, actually, wasn't there? There was he out qualified Verstappen in the Qatar sprint, but did he finish ahead? No. So it's the case that I think that they had to get rid of Perez because with hindsight, he was still a better choice than Sonoda and Lawson, but you could not have foresaw how badly Sonoda and like everyone was saying it can't get worse than this, and then it got worse than this. What do you say?
I have 2 points to make there. First of all, in the Qatar sprint, I don't think Tsunoda finishing ahead of Max was ever on the table because by that point they needed every point they could get.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have even allowed Yuki Tsunoda to finish ahead. They
Yeah.
always were going to switch positions, so you can't really hold that against Yuki. What I want to point out regarding Yuki is that for most of the season, Max always had the newest spec of the car, and Yuki did not. And whenever Yuki did get the equal spec, and the team always commented on this as well, like we got plenty of from Lauren Mekis and even from Helmut Marko about this throughout the season. When Yuki had the same spec, he was often within 2 or 3 tenths in quali. And the rest of the time, he was say 5 to 8 tenths off in quali. So in the same spec car, at least in quali, Yuki wasn't like. Don't get me wrong, he had an abysmal season, not as abysmal as people like to say, because most of the time he just didn't have the equal machinery. Of course, he also doesn't have the equal racecraft and everything, and he was in a position to make equal benefit from the strategy and all that. So like, there's plenty there to call abysmal. Like, let's call a spade, but still, like, you have to give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit.
Were most of the spec issues stemming from the Imola crash as well, especially in the first third of the season?
I don't exactly know where they came from. I think it's just Red Bull always produced the parts for Max first and only one set due to capacity, costs, whatever, and because Max was the title contender and Yuki didn't really have that top priority.
I would carry on.
Sorry. Oh yeah, on the subject of where Max lost the title, I meant to say this earlier. I don't think Max lost the title at any particular race this year, or even any particular incident this year. I think there were 2 main points where Max lost the title. And this ties into Checo as well to some degree. Max lost the title with the 2025 title with the 2023 underfloor upgrade that basically sent Red Bull down the wrong development path and meant they basically developed themselves into a dead end for 2025 that they had to not exactly revert themselves out of, but they basically had to find a way to get that car that took a wrong development path back to the pace that it would need to fight for a title. Words difficult. So there's that. And I meant to say something else, but I completely forgot. So continue, please.
Yeah, I'll continue. I'm going to throw it forward actually to 2026 because people have been saying that a lot of people have been saying that with the new regulations they have a clean slate, and that finally that for some reason Red Bull will come along and start building a car that both drivers can drive. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the reason why I don't think it's going to happen is because the reason why the car is like it has been since 2019 is because Verstappen has been a level above his teammates. He was a level above Gasly, even despite Gasly's good 2018. He was a level above Gasly. He was a level above Albon. He was a level above Perez. Even in their best, like Perez at the start of 2022, he wasn't far off, but he wasn't wasn't able to consistently show, you know what, I can beat him.
Okay, I want to come back to that quickly before CZ jumps in. I'm sorry to interrupt again. I don't think Max is entirely the reason that the car is the way it is, because oversteery cars with strong front ends, that is what exactly suits Max, are basically Newey signature. Newey has always built these cars, for the most part. Well, I mean, the Vettel cars, they dialed it back a bit for Vettel, but apart from those cars, Newey has pretty much always built cars with insane front ends, and some drivers take to that better than others.
Yes.
So it's more about the driver treatment and the team environment and everything around that, and less about the car itself being specifically developed for one driver. Like the McLaren in 2005, those McLarens, the Hakkinen one, the 2002 McLaren, who were those cars specifically developed for?
They were developed for Raikkonen.
Well, the 2002 car wasn't exactly developed for Raikkonen, was it? He wasn't the team. He wasn't part of the feedback for developing the car before the season. And that was just a Newey car, basically.
Yeah.
Newey always makes these super. I don't think Newey has ever built a truly understeery car.
I would say that definitely positively angled or positive front end cars are the way to go in terms of car development, and cars that don't handle that way are generally as a result of driver weakness in terms of driving style. Because I do think that drivers who have a slightly oversteering style are generally better than ones with an understeering tendency or a neutral or whatever that sort of tendency.
Then you have someone like Fernando Alonso, who's basically the most extreme understeer driver in history, and he's insanely fast in an understeery car. Like that Renault, the whole balance of that 2005 Renault and the 2006 one, that car, that no front and a shit ton of rear, and that car was just a rocket ship under Alonso. So
I do still maintain, but I think Alonso's maybe maybe Alonso is the only like understeer driver who I'd put in that. But even then, I don't put him in my top 10 of all time. So I think all of my top 10 of all time, with the exception of maybe Alain Prost, but he was in an era where they didn't gear cars towards understeer or oversteer. You just built a car and it was either fast or it wasn't. So I suppose there's that. But yeah, I would say I don't think that I think that what's going to happen is Hadjar might start the 2026 season similar to what Yuki is now, maybe slightly better because Hadjar's an infinitely better driver than Yuki is, maybe 1 or 2 tenths off of Verstappen. But I think we're just going to get the same process of, like we had with Checo in 2022, Verstappen wants the car sharper and sharper, and Hadjar, although I believe he's much better prepared for that than Tsunoda, than Lawson, than maybe not Perez, but the other rookies that came along, because I think he's got more potential than those guys, all of those guys, bar Gasly. I think that we're just going to get the same cycle of Verstappen wants the car sharper and sharper throughout the year, the gap gets bigger and bigger, and for some reason people seem to think that because they don't think Red Bull will be in a title fight because of the extensive development they've done this year, that somehow that will make them want to get a car for both drivers. But at the end of the day, if you gear the car towards both drivers, you're gearing it away from Verstappen. So people act like they will go from finishing 5th with Verstappen, for example, if they're the 3rd fastest car, and 18th with Hadjar, to going 5th and 6th if they make it for both drivers. It'll probably make it go from 5th with Verstappen to 7th and 8th with both him and Hadjar because they're really close. Like we saw the races where Tsunoda, where Perez were close. The car wasn't on a better level. Like, for example, I think Baku 24 was a good example of that. Bahrain 2025 was a good example of that, where Tsunoda was somewhat close, but Verstappen was nowhere because the car just wasn't in that window. And I think Ace has talked about this a couple of times, where when the car isn't in the window that Verstappen needs, the second driver looks a lot better.
Go on, Jack.
Yeah, I think another good thing that helped Max out this year was that his attitude changed a lot. Can't remember which race it was, but obviously we saw in Spain, he saw the red mist as he used to do a lot of the time. But about halfway through, he just seemed to just sit back and not really care so much anymore. And then all of a sudden, he found himself catching the McLarens, and then he's up there with a race or two to go, and he still was just sort of really relaxed about it. Like, yeah, if I win, I win. If I don't, I don't. And I was quite impressed with him because he changed his attitude. He wasn't so aggressive. He wasn't, really trying to get in the other drivers' heads. He was just chilling out, just doing, just driving to see what happened. And I think that was quite a big, how do I say? that was a big factor in him coming back. And I think Yuki perhaps was trying too hard. He had a big opportunity for himself, and he's got Max as his teammate, and he just really kept trying, and it just wasn't the case. And Max kept trying at the start of the season, but then it wasn't quite working out. And the moment he just went, whatever, it just seemed to work quite well for him. But going into next year, I will just say, I've got an old 2021 hat here. And I thought it was going to come back into relevance, and it's not. So it's going to have to go back in its box. But yeah, I'm really impressed with Max's attitude change. And if he continues that, then who knows? As a lot of you have said, not quite confident with the new engines. I'm not totally convinced either, but we'll have to see.
You're going to need a 2018 hat, actually.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say you need a 2018 Ricardo hat.
Yeah.
With the Dayland hot stylized number.
Yeah. I would. I just want to add a very quick statistic to prove that Yuki and Max are equal, because this year Max has 8 pole positions, and Yuki this year also has 8 Q3 appearances. So in some ways they can be said as equal. But yeah, otherwise it was just desperately awful from every angle. I mean, there are some mitigating circumstances, and then also you have to think about the fact that, if you think about the fact that, I don't know, like back in if you were in the 80s, you were 5/10 of Senna. You were probably going to be, I don't know, 5th, 6th in the championship, and constantly being like top 10 in qualifying, because the gaps were simply so large. And so this half a second gap is just infinitely magnified because of how close the grid is, how tight the competition is. So Tsunoda definitely looks worse because of his era, but then I'm also kind of glad that we got to a point where being half a second off your teammate is just like the most unacceptable thing ever, and basis to be kicked out of the sport effectively. So I'm also glad that we got to this point eventually.
Well, I mean, whenever Senna's teammates were half a second off, they join him on the front row.
Yeah.
And finish on the podium.
The prime example of this, in Monaco 1988 and 1989, Prost got out qualified obviously by 1.4 seconds in 88, and I think it was like 1.1 in 1989. And yet he was still, I think in 1988, I think he was still 1.2 seconds clear of Berger in third, and he was like 7/10 clear in 1989. So it didn't matter. Like Prost, for example, knew how to play the game, and he knew to just qualify second and get a race set up, because at the end of the day, you can just overtake one car in the race, and that's what Senna didn't realise.
I mean, half a second was kind of meaningless back then. And this is a general point about the entire grid, is that it's a testament to the driver's abilities, the fact that the gaps are so small, and yet the team order remained more or less unchanged all season, because you could have one mistake in quali and you're suddenly last when normally you'd be up near the front, and that almost never happened, and it's so that they're all driving more or less at their limits.
Yes.
Yeah. They're often like 3/10 spanning like 10, 15 qualifying positions, which is quite rare overall in F1 history.
I mean, Hungary was ridiculous. I think that's the closest qualifying ever, because I think Verstappen was 4/10 down on pole and he was 8th. Like it was unreal. I mean, even Abu Dhabi at the end of the season, I think there was a field spread of about 1.5 seconds.
What I meant to say on the mitigating circumstances thing is that while regarding Tsunoda, mitigating circumstances do have to be addressed. When your teammate is outscoring you by a factor of 13, then I mean, the train it had emergency brakes, it had first aid kits, it had fire extinguishers, but ultimately it still derailed and everyone died. So, like, there's your mitigating circumstances. It just didn't amount to anything.
And if I could just quickly add, in my opinion, where Max lost the title was Hungary, where on basically just pure pace, he managed to get a 9th place, with admittedly not the best strategy, but that was the absolute low point of the season. And if he could have grabbed just like a 5th or a 4th place, which was basically on the card for every other race weekend, this could have been definitely a very different outcome going ahead.
not even a ninth place, just a seventh place, which is the place he was running before the strategies started to playing out. So, if he actually just settled for seventh place, nowadays we would say Max Verstappen is champion by 2 points. But this leads to a bigger talking point, which Jack already approached, which is the approach Verstappen had at different moments of the season. Jack is right. At the start of the season, Verstappen was doing absolutely everything just to win. That was the only thing that mattered to Verstappen. And so I remember, for example, Miami. He got overtaken by both McLarens, so they immediately pitted Verstappen to try another strategy. And so when the safety car came out a few laps later, he got undercut by Russell, and so he lost a place there. In Hungary, it's the same. They really wanted to finish ahead of the midfielders, and so they put Verstappen on a two-stopper, and that ultimately lost in places to the one-stoppers. And at the same time, this very approach allowed him to win Imola. No other driver would have ever dared to make the overtake around the outside at turn 1 at Imola like Verstappen did. And that is the entire reason Verstappen won the race, because if he hadn't been first after corner 3, he would have gone for an undercut, would have gotten screwed over by the safety car, and then the race would have been completely different, but Verstappen would not have won Imola. So, it's a balance. What he gains by daring so much, does it make up for the times where daring too much lost in points? And then later on, when he finally gave up and just settled and waited to see how things played out, it was completely different. Again, he gained some victories that shouldn't have been, like Qatar, by simply doing the right thing. McLaren completely played themselves into losing a short win. So we can pinpoint at different moments, but then we have to look at the bigger picture, because if Red Bull doesn't screw up the strategies in Miami and Hungary, in my opinion, then the same attitude means he doesn't win Imola. So, it's I think it's a balance you have to make to decide if it was worth it or not.
In terms of Max's attitude, I'm amazed because I've never seen someone so unbothered about losing the championship, especially by such a narrow margin. Because had Austria and Spain not happened and he still lost by 2 points, it'd be easy to say, well, I did everything I could and it wasn't enough. But there must be part of him knowing that those things, admittedly, Austria wasn't his fault, but Spain was. It's like, if that hadn't happened, I'd be champion now. But the first, Miami was a very desperate performance. He kept pushing people off track to try and get position. But then after that, he kind of mentally gave up mid-season because he realised he couldn't compete. But then even once it turned around in the second half and he was closing in and winning races, he still was being very carefree. Even though across the season in general, during races, he'll still get annoyed if the gearbox is funny or the car's, got no grip or blah, 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 which we heard all the time on the radio. But otherwise, he just, because he kept hammering this in Abu Dhabi. He's like, well, I'm not supposed to be here. I shouldn't be in this fight. And they're asking about preparations. And he's like, well, spend time with my daughter, work on my sim racing stuff and my GT3 team and everything. And him also being relaxed because he famously did the Nürburgring race and won it as well, is that he's just not caring less, but just seems less frazzled. But he would have known that he'd then have 5 consecutive titles matching Schumacher. It would have been one of the biggest comebacks ever, and he just doesn't care, and it's odd. And maybe having a kid has made him reframe his perspective on life, or I don't know. But anyone else would be losing their shit, I think, at that, and he just was absolutely fine with it. Okay, then
move on. Yes.
Yeah, we've spent a long time on Red Bull. Ferrari, yeah.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
Yeah. Well, in this case, most of the times, maybe shit. It's all, at the beginning of the season, obviously everyone was really, really excited, myself included. Even though I don't like him, I was just as excited as everyone else to see Lewis in red. And that was one of my biggest drives to actually go to Silverstone, because I need to see Lewis in red in that. But I knew it wasn't going to go well because I also kind of hoped it wouldn't, because it's like, it's not fair if Leclerc and Vettel and Kimi and everyone else has to suffer at Ferrari and Lewis just gets to win everything. Like, he has to suffer as well if they did. So that at least happened, and it meant it was his first season with no podiums. And Leclerc, it doesn't surprise me at all that he outperformed him because it's his home team and he knows it, and he got a lot of podiums and had a quite understated season, just clouded by all the usual Ferrari shit, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we already delved into it earlier on about the whole dumpster fire thing, and there was a lot of promise and hope in preseason testing. I chickened out in my predictions and I said, "Oh, maybe Ferrari will win," but it's just outside the Schumacher era. Ferrari's always been fraught with fights over itself, and just it's a team that should have a lot more championships than it actually does, and we've seen with the general attitude of select personnel in that establishment has been worrisome. Now, not everything that the drivers are going to suggest is necessarily what you should take on board, but there almost seems to be this attitude of resistance to it, as if, like, what do they know? We're fine. We know what we're doing. And really, we've seen that teams that have had sort of outdated ideology, I guess you could say, you take Ron Dennis at McLaren. We know what he built. He, ruled it with an iron fist from the 80s to the 2000s. But there came a point where it just wasn't working anymore. And it became a shell of its former self in the 2010s. And sort of a new ideology, I guess, came along. And it built the team to what it is now. So there needs to be a shift in dynamic, but there doesn't seem to be the hunger for it outside of the damn drivers and perhaps, some people with not enough power in the establishment. So, I don't know. 7 podiums from Leclerc this year. Fantastic. And a pole at Hungary, I think. Great season from the guy. Top 3 in terms of driver performance. Lewis, yeah, that was sad to watch. I think we can all agree on that. I doubt he'll fully recover next year. And I guess I'm suggesting in that regard that next year will be his last in F1.
I think I have to agree with that. I have to agree with that last statement anyway. I think the flat bottom cars will help Lewis get onto a more consistent front, but I don't think a 2026 Lewis Hamilton's average performance is going to be good enough. Because we've seen, and I've said this multiple times, and I'll say it again, that Lewis hasn't been the most consistent driver throughout his career. Like, throughout you remove 2015 and 2012 from the equation because those two are his greatest seasons, and he hardly made any mistakes in those years, if any. You look at the average like Lewis Hamilton season. People somehow talk about like 2020 as his greatest season when he made at least 3 or 4 quantifiable errors that lost him wins, and his consistency has, ever since like 2018, which I think was his last properly good quality, mostly error-free season. Ever since then, he's just slowly gone down the hill. 2019, he started making more mistakes, racing incidents, collisions. 2020, a little bit more, but more kind of on the personal front. 2021 was a culmination of his downfall over the previous 2 years. And ever since then, like 2023 was a kind of a spike in the curve, but it's just he's now hit rock bottom. And I think that he could come back. It can't get worse than this. I think that his average performance will improve because especially in qualifying, he just can't get a grip of these cars. I don't see him. I don't see him improving because at this age, with a couple of very small exceptions, you don't get better. It's just not possible. I think that the only drivers who've really got better at this age in the modern era, I think Alonso, I think obviously had a step up from 2021 until from for the rest of his his stint up until now. But that's just because he took time to get back into the sport. And I think it's the same with Michael Schumacher. I think that a 43-year-old Michael Schumacher was leaps and bounds better than what Lewis Hamilton was this year. And even Schumacher in his first season of his comeback in 2010, I think was better than what Lewis was this year. And I think that says a lot that Lewis, he just you take away Lewis Hamilton and you replace his name with let's say it was Luke Browning's debut season in Formula One at Ferrari somehow. No one's repping him. No one's saying, oh, he was unlucky. Oh, we need to give him time. The only reason why Lewis Hamilton is being given any sort of plaudits or any sort of hope is because of past achievements. And I think if you bank on past achievements, it's not going to go well. And I think that there should be very, very low expectations. If he wins a race, I'll expect if the Ferrari is somehow better, let's say it's the second best car and it's good on a couple of tracks, he might win a race. He might outperform, even if the car's not the greatest, he might outperform with the flat bottom cars, Leclerc maybe 5 times across a season. But I won't give him more than about that. I don't think that he consistently beats Leclerc. Leclerc is in the form of his life, and we saw this year, he's pretty much bulletproof. There was maybe 1, 2, 3 weekends where he was bad, even in Lewis's prime. Like 2015, 2012, maybe slightly below, maybe 2014, maybe 2007. Even in those seasons, he wasn't hitting those numbers. He wasn't consistently performing to that level. So I think that Lewis is not just over the hill, but I don't think we've seen it with all the old drivers who've kind of gone through slumps. Schumacher and Alonso's, I wouldn't even call Alonso in 2021 a slump. I wouldn't call Schumacher in 2010 a slump. They were just getting back used to things because they'd spent 3 years out of the sport, or 2 years out of the sport in Alonso's case. Lewis has none of those such affirmations or excuses. I think that, yeah, unless he somehow comes back and even if he comes back and wins a couple of races in 2026, I think he should retire because he just ever since 2021, or ever since 2020, sorry, he's been detracting from his legacy rather than adding to it.
I just kind of disagree with no one would be repping him. I think if Hamilton was a rookie, you could make a genuine argument for him being the rookie of the year. Because after all, he did beat Antonelli. He had a slower car. He had a lot less drivable of a car. And he was much more consistent. So I think, yes, through the lens that it is Lewis Hamilton, he had an awful season, and I think you're right to berate him for that, but I don't think it reached quite those levels of awfulness. And he had the one sprint where he won probably because his car was set too low, so even that is just kind of fraudulent. But I still don't think it was as bad as you make it out to be. And unless you say nobody is rapping all the other rookies, and Antonelli especially, I just don't think you can make a case for Hamilton being a worse rookie than all the others.
I would say that if Lewis was a rookie this season, I'd put him definitely below Hadjar and Behrman, undoubtedly. Let me actually get my ranking the 2025 drivers list up, because I did make a list, and hold on, let me have a look.
I mean, on the thing of the disqualification in China, this is where maybe they should start, because normally they pick cars at random, don't they, for Parc Ferme at the end? Is maybe every race, every car should be inspected, because chances are that car was illegal in that race, but then we'd have infinite disqualifications, but maybe that would compensate for reliability being so good as well.
In my ranking driver performance from the 2025 F1 season, Lewis is in 18th, and the only rookies he's ahead of are Lawson and Doohan. So, I mean, yeah, well done. You're ahead of Lawson and Doohan. Lawson has the racecraft of a pigeon, and Doohan has no arms.
That's a bit harsh on Lawson.
What did you say?
That's ranking him ahead of Lawson is a bit harsh on Lawson, isn't it?
I think that Lawson. Maybe I'll have to have another look at Lawson's season.
Have another look, yes.
But
Go on, do the powerlifting of defending Lawson for me. I'll have no part in that.
But what I'm saying is, it's not a good Lewis season, and in this era of cars where everything is so close, his inconsistencies that he's had throughout his career that people just glaze over because of his win statistics are now finally getting shown up. And I think that, yeah, he just needs to either call it a day, or his fans should finally admit that he's not in the conversation of GOAT status. But that will never happen, because all fans of Hamilton, Verstappen, Alonso, the super fans I'm talking about, are all gimps.
Ace?
All I can say about this situation is that here in Italy, the not public consensus, the consensus among the journalists, analysts, the people around Formula One here in Italy, is that Lewis is not finished. He was given a bad car, which was not developed, and so it was normal that he struggled. And basically everybody expects that if next year he has a car that is competitive and that he likes, he'll be back on form. He has not lost any speed.
All I will say in rebuttal to that is Michael Schumacher in 1996. He had a bad car, and what did he do? He showed everyone why he was so good. Drivers in bad cars tend to do better in bad cars than they do in good cars. Or they have seasons that people rate a lot more. Schumacher 96, 97, Verstappen 2025. I think that the true greats show their flowers and their colours in those good cars, or in those bad cars, sorry, or comparatively bad cars, than they do in other seasons. Like, people talk about Alain Prost's best season being 1986, not any of his championship years. 1986 because not championship years, or his other championship years, should I say? They say 1986 because of the uphill mountain he had to climb. But when Lewis can't do uphill climbs in 2009, when he can't do it in 2011, when the car wasn't right at the top, when he constantly make these errors, people make excuses for him, and I don't think that should happen. I think that he should be held accountable for his bad seasons, or comparatively bad seasons again. Because, like, for example, 2011. He was really fast in one lap pace, but it doesn't matter when you're crashing with literally every driver you come across.
I mean, it's reiterated by me. I've said that when I was trying to compile the best races by each champion, almost all of them, their best races came in seasons where they didn't win the championship.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, they had basically the fastest car and could just cruise to wins or whatever. But I think with Lewis, towards the end of the season as well, I think he took it a bit too literally when John Elkann said they need to talk less and drive more, because all of his post-race interviews, he would just sit there and say nothing. But the thing is, that I imagine is not pleased the Ferrari, the board, and everything to just not even do the media commitments properly.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that, because like people often give Stroll a lot of shit for his interviews and for keeping the answers brief, but then there was Lewis' attitude in the second half of this year. And it got worse as it went on, and at the end he was extremely disrespectful to the interviewers, basically, near enough flipping them off and giving no answers whatsoever. Like, there was one interview, I don't think he said a single word. He just made a noise, and that was about it. Like, and that was I don't know, that extremely disrespectful. Like, you're being paid the second highest salary on the grid. You're a 7-time world champion. Yes, you're not having the best of seasons, but Ferrari have expectations of you. Your fans have expectations of you. Give a fucking answer to the interviewer, man. Like, at least treat the media with respect.
I just think that his error proneness, especially, is starting to finally come to fore. Because I've this is for another future video idea. I've compiled a list of every single incident Lewis Hamilton has had in his career, whether it was wheel to wheel, whether it was a solo like spin off, a mistake, going off track, practice, qualifying, race. In 400 races, he's gone off or spun or had contact with another driver 295 times, which is like 3 in every 4 races. And I think that. I think that finally, I hope that people finally come around to see that actually this kind of form in 2025 is just it's just a culmination of previous years where people have ignored his flaws.
I mean, even though there has never been a driver who has been a bigger beneficiary of stack padding, at the same time, it is kind of sad to see someone of his caliber and his status having their career end so unceremoniously. Because, and it happens, there are some champions that have had, I mean, Scheckter, for example, Mansell kind of rage quit Formula One and stuff, and it peters out quite badly. Hakkinen as well, it didn't end so well. And it's just kind of sad because you want all of them to be able to end on a high, and that's where there is the logic in Rosberg retiring when he did, because there's no greater high than retiring as the champion.
Yeah.
So but you wonder how if he'll turn it around or not. But it's I think basically he is getting kind of found out when he's no longer got cars that are both insanely fast and insanely reliable to kind of shield him.
And a subordinate teammate or teammates who aren't really on the same caliber as he is.
Yeah.
I have nothing but respect. Sorry.
And what I can say is that if next year doesn't go a certain way, Checo Perez is going to be the most experienced driver on the grid for 2027, in my opinion.
God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Alonso
he will.
Lewis need to leave first, yeah.
Alonso and Lewis. And when they've gone, there'll be nobody left from the noughties in Formula One.
Damn.
And they're the last remaining link to both the V10 cars and the non-diffuser V8s, if you want to call them that. Like the last true Formula One cars, they've all been weird kind of facsimiles, I don't know, caricatures of cars since then. Yeah.
It doesn't take that many retirees for Lance Stroll to become the most experienced F1 driver in the sport.
What, Perez, Bottas, Hamilton, Alonso,
Sainz, Verstappen, Hülkenberg,
Ocon.
Same year, no?
Ocon?
Oh, yeah, 1 year
2020,
before.
2016.
But he missed the season.
Ocon missed the whole season.
So it's
yeah,
the same
he did.
experience as Stroll.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
it shows how far it's gone. But yeah, for me,
That's
I think
terrifying.
even so, when Lewis is gone, like for me, like since I started watching Formula One, there has been one race that he wasn't in, and so it is going to be a very weird experience having him not on the grid. I think for a lot of people,
That's probably how people growing up in the 1990s felt when Rubens Barrichello left F1.
yeah, or even Patrese if they were that devoted to him.
Yes.
Well, I felt about Raikkonen when Raikkonen retired. When I started watching as a kid, he was there. Then I watched again as a teen. He was there. Then I started watching again. End of 2020, he was there, and then he retired. That was a shame.
It's not quite the same because he had that break in the middle. So we already had 2 seasons without him.
True, but I didn't watch them.
And the same thing with Alonso. He had 2. He's retired already technically, and
He
then
missed
come back.
3 seasons, Alonso even.
Yeah, 2000. Well, yeah, but obviously back then he was still a rookie, 2002, more or less.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Williams, I guess, is the next one.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, this one is really interesting. Actually, looking at the because how one driver they were the inverse of one started well and ended badly, and the other way around as that. But Albon, like his good performances this season, it could be because of recency bias. I don't really remember them that well, even though there were a lot of them. But then it shows how much he collapsed. That all of their double points finishes were in the first half of the season. There weren't any later on, even though Sainz got the 2 podiums. But yeah, even though the team were incredibly inconsistent, things are clearly improving a lot. And I imagine now that James is desperate to keep Sainz there as long as he can. And maybe Sainz is going to get one over and think, maybe I will actually stick it out here instead of jumping into whatever front-running seat I can when the opportunity comes.
I think, just like 2022, just like 2023, just like 2024, that the Albon's early season performances, I think we should question whether those performances were a combination of him and the car finally coming to fruition, or just the car coming to fruition, because we saw his fault because those performances came when Sainz was at rock bottom. Whereas as soon as Sainz got up to a level where he's still nowhere near as experienced as Albon is in that car, and I know he's got all the experience he does, but he was finally up to his personal, maybe not his peak, but definitely up there towards the end of the season, and he completely destroyed Albon. Is it the case that, just like we had with Sargent and with De Vries and Latifi, is it the case that now Albon is the driver who is holding that team back in terms of being the wrong guy in the second car. And that if we had, let's say, two Sainzes and one of them was actually dialed into the car at the start of the season, would they have got a million more points? And do they need another second driver now?
Well, I mean, me talking about drivers getting found out, yeah, Albon is getting found out because he's been glazed so much by having Latifi and then Sargent and then Colapinto as his teammate. And this is the thing that annoyed me is people always had to go all three of them for crashing so much. And it's like Albon crashes just as much as them.
Yes.
It's just because he sometimes scores points, it's okay. And it's like, no, he's holding them back just as much in terms of development and everything.
Didn't Albon beat Sargent in the Constructors' Championship?
I think he
he
might
beat
have.
Sargent.
I mean, it helps that he did the full season and Sargent didn't. If we're talking
No,
about
I meant the year before that, I think, actually.
He might have, yeah.
Quickly before Sizzy jumps in, I just want to say, by the way, after Monza, I believe, Albon had, I think it was something ridiculous like a 60-point gap or a 60-point gap to Sainz. And that was closed down in the final 8 or so races just because of Sainz's podiums and his consistency. Albon didn't score a single point after Monza, and I think that is utterly damning. I don't know how you can do
he
that.
He did score in a sprint.
Kota sprint, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sprint races don't count.
It's even worse when you look at qualifying because in the qualifying championship, Sainz got 84 points and Alex got 36.
What, in the whole season?
Yeah. So in qualifying, he was basically 2.5 times better, Sainz.
But they were just racing too hard.
Yeah, I think as much as we berate Albon right now, we still have to remember that he still beat Sainz by 9 points, and obviously Sainz is the one who has to acclimatize to a new team. But I think it's important to just remember that Albon still had an okay season as far as the season as a whole is concerned, and we just sort of look at, well, in 24 races he scored about 73 points. That's an okay result for the 5th best car. And just don't get into the details too much of like how much of that came in the first half and how almost none of that came in the second half of the season.
I think there's just a lot of context to consider for the first half of the season because, unfortunately, I don't have my notes for this anymore because I'm on Ciaron server anymore. But there were like 8 consecutive race weekends that Sainz was compromised in some form or another. He either hit traffic in quali or got blocked in quali. He got hit by Tsunoda on, I think, 3 opening laps. He got hit by Tsunoda or spun around. I think also by Lawson once and by Hadjar once, I'm not entirely sure. He went like 8 race weekends without a clean representation of what he was capable of. And as soon as that stopped, is basically when he came back. And he lost, I would argue he easily lost 30 points. I don't have my calculation, unfortunately, but I would argue he easily lost 30 points there through no fault of his own, just from extremely bad luck. And once that got ironed out, like, of course, he did start the first few races off, but you cannot blame the entire 8-race stretch on adapting to the car when so much was happening to him. And in the second half of the year, he just wiped the floor with Albon. But even then, I wouldn't say that Albon is being found out per se. I think Albon just sort of, I don't know how to explain it really. I don't want to explain it really. I think they're a solid lineup. I think they're one of the best lineups on the grid on average. They're both in the top 10 for a reason in the standings. And I think they're going to take Williams forward. And I think even if Sainz initially, we know that Sainz initially only saw Williams as a stopgap. He famously has that clause in his contract that if a Mercedes seat or a Red Bull seat becomes available to him, that he can leave. I don't think he's going to leave anymore. I think he's fully on board with Williams now. I think with the progress he's seen at that team and with the support he's getting, and the team is actually listening to him. Ferrari weren't listening to him, but Williams are listening to him and implementing his suggestions. And we've seen the entire statistic of how much he's on the radio during races and so on, how much discourse there is, how much he gives the engineers feedback about the car and everything. I think he's going to try to get there with Williams and maybe win his championship or at least races there.
Seems happy there.
He's absolutely happy there.
He's like one of the most well-educated, uneducated drivers in that he's extremely switched on just from a technical level and engineering side, even though he doesn't have any formal qualifications in that area.
Yeah. No, he's easily one of the most intelligent drivers on the grid, and his technical feedback. McLaren praised it a ton, and now Williams are praising it a ton. Ferrari never really talked about it, but they don't really talk about technical feedback in general. Arriva Bene just wrote a nice comment or made a nice comment about technical feedback from Vettel and Hamilton, and said that driver yapping is not productive and they should stop. But yeah, that's just Arriva Bene's opinion. There's Williams. I think they're on a good path for next year, and if Mercedes do build the best engine, which there's a good chance they will, and with what Williams were able to accomplish with a car, remember, Williams switched development quite early. So they didn't get a better car towards the end of the year where they scored podiums. They just figured out how to set it up correctly and how to get the most out of it from a car that they basically hadn't upgraded in ages. So they're the only team that improved without upgrades, basically.
I think that the takeover by Dalton, it is starting to work, because now that Jos Capito and Francois Xavier de Mesa were there for like a year, but now with what's his face, James there, I mean, because he's very ambitious, but also everyone loves that he does the vows of it, and he's very upfront and honest that, you know, the car sucks, yes, we're trying to get it better. And now I think his ambition and his determination is beginning to come to fruition, and so we could see some big surprises from them next year.
Yeah.
I guess the next one is Racing Bulls. We've sort of indirectly covered them a lot with rants about Lawson and, well, Hadjar and stuff, but yeah, I mean, just thinking, like, Hungary is an interesting one because Lawson finished ahead of Max in that race, and that, I guess, shows that there isn't this automatic thing that you're the B team, get out of the way for the A team. That doesn't seem to always be the case with them anymore, but for by their normal standards over the past 20 years, that was a relatively good season. As we said, all of us seem to agree that Hadjar was the rookie of the season, and Lawson was just like, we could have had Yuri Vips. Like, that's all I'm saying.
How dare you? It's yeah. Hadjar was just outstanding this year. There's not much you can really add to it. Just all you really have to do to refer to is just the podium that he got in Zandvoort. And yeah, I do kind of wonder what Yuki could have done in that seat if he was there for the full year, because for the first couple of races he was ahead of Hadjar. But then again, you never know. Tide could have turned just as easily, but it's coulda, woulda, shoulda, I guess. Liam in that seat, just, yeah, there was Austria, there was Baku, cool, whatever. One or two good performances a season does not make. He had the suspension tweak in Austria, which helped him with the car. And it's like, cool. What happened for the rest of the season? Because it was, you know, not a hell of a lot better than what came before that. Qualifying was crap as compared to Hadjar. Race pace was okay. Racecraft was just arse, really. And he's going to be up against Arvid Lindblad next year, which, you know, Lindblad is a bit of an unknown quantity in racing cars because it's been flaky, I guess. Some good moments, some not so good moments. And as we know, Formula 2 is just completely unreliable for gauging where talent is, depending upon, you know, what side of Bruno Michel's bed you wake up on. So, no idea if Arvid will step up to the plate, but frankly, after the season he had, I'm surprised that Liam was not sent to the glue factory. But yeah, stunning season from Hadjar. Rookie of the year, no doubt. Big shoes to fill their Red Bull seat. Whether he'll sink or swim, I don't know. But you just hope that we haven't already seen the best of Hadjar.
I think Hadjar is a strong case to make for a driver who starts their career at the absolute low point and just gets better from there. but that's only 1 year, so we'll see where that goes. Did any other driver ever start their career on such a low point as him? And then went on to actually do really well.
I mean, Vettel, if you want to get pedantic, Vettel got fined like about 5 seconds into his career.
Didn't Max retire before he made it to the grid or something like that as well?
He retired in Australia, but he wasn't one of the 5 drivers who didn't start the race.
Yeah, he did start the race.
Okay.
Keke Rosberg spent like 4 seasons in absolutely abhorrent cars and then got a championship-winning car and then won.
Well, yeah, Damien Hill as well. He was failing to qualify in that Brabham for half a season.
I wouldn't say Keke got a championship-winning car. He just won, but he didn't get a championship-winning car.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was a minor miracle that he did win, but to be fair, he did the job. It was a good. It was a good season. It wasn't his fault that the Renaults and Ferraris had turbos and were faster, but just the Renaults were killing themselves, and the Ferraris were killing someone else.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean that
you just got to work with what you had and what he had. He beat the formidable John Watson, so fair enough to him. That's why I say that there's no such thing as an undeserving champion. I mean, like, you can argue, for instance, Phil Hill, because of Wolfgang von Trips having a sudden departure from this earth, but even then, I don't know, man. You got to be good to get to F1.
You do. Phil Hill, I think, is definitely the most... If there's anyone who's going to be an undeserving champion, it's him, because that Ferrari was miles better than anything else on the grid. And on the 2 circuits that actually that are most based around driver talent on the calendar at the time, Monaco and the Nordschleife, he got decimated by Moss. So, yeah. There was that. Keke Rosberg, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated drivers in F1 history. In my opinion, he's top 10 fastest drivers of all time.
I mean, 82
and one of the best at race car recovery. Have you seen some of the recoveries that he would have? He knew car control.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he knew car control on the basis that he was born in Finland, but still, I don't like it when people put down other world. It's like, Jesus, guys, they're all good.
Yeah,
I mean, some better than others, but no need to put them down just to rep your other driver. Like, come on, give them more respect.
I mean, 82 is another example of trouncing your teammate, because Derek Daly got 6 points that season or something, and.
Well, they switched. They chopped and changed drivers because Carlos Reutemann was in at the start. Then Maggie Thatcher cut his nuts off, and he went off into retirement. Yeah. Then they brought in Mario Andretti for just Long Beach.
Just Long Beach, and then they boycotted Imola. So there were only he was his teammate for 12 of the 16 races.
Yes.
To be fair to Derek Daly, he almost won the Monaco Grand Prix in a Formula Ford. So
Yeah, and then the gearbox.
When the rear wing,
That was hilarious because he was carrying on with no front or rear wing still in the race, and then the gearbox literally fell out of the back of the car, and that's why he had to stop.
Well, hang on, didn't back in the early 80s, sometimes they just ran without front wings.
Yeah, but they
just
did.
By default.
Yeah, but they at Monaco they did need it, I think, for stability and stuff. But yeah,
mate. Well, either way, it was just remarkable seeing that thing going around, and
To be honest, I would have liked to see had Carlos Reutemann done the full season in '82, because I mean the reason why he retired because he didn't want to be in a British team as an Argentinian, because he already knew about that point he wanted to go into Argentinian politics. So yeah, I would have loved to have seen how he'd have done, and if Rosberg would have still won the title in '82 if Reutemann, who by the way was a very underrated driver and arguably champion material, especially in 1981, I'd have loved to see what he'd have done in that car.
Well, he did.
I think it was 6 1/2 dozen of the other, to be honest with you, because again, Rosberg was good, but it was also a time where reliability meant a lot. Like your campaign could have easily been thrown off, with your Cosworth blowing itself up while you're 2 laps ahead of your nearest rival. So who knows? It's all hypothetical, but he really should have won 1980. But he virtually threw that away and gave it to
Alan Jones.
Oh no, not 1980, 1981. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
I see. Okay.
Caesar's Palace, because he ran away right at the end.
We did an episode on that with Josh.
I think we did that with you, didn't we?
But then again, there wasn't
I
there,
think
there was
so,
a race that year. Was it in San Marino or was it in Harama where they cancelled? They turned it from a Formula One race into a Formula Libre race, and he won it.
No, 1980. That race was cancelled, or it was made non-championship, and Jones won it, and he was annoyed. It's like, well, I need this for my championship, but then he won the championship anyway.
I swear it happened in '81 with Roseman as well.
There were a bunch of races that got cancelled, and the FISA FOCA bollocks, and it's very confusing to remember when all of them. But that 82 Williams, I mean, even though the engine was underpowered, it had absolutely supreme aerodynamics, which was what helped a lot.
I think it was still
the.
Wait a minute, hang on. Underpowered. Weren't they running the same engine as McLaren anyway?
Yeah.
Basically, anyone that wasn't running a turbo was just running a Ford Cosworth DF.
Yeah. But I mean, underpowered in the sense that the Ferrari and Renault they were like what 150, 150 horsepower more.
Yeah, but the Renault wasn't too much of a problem. The Renaults typically qualify the best, but they just always blew their turbos. So it was just down to the Ferraris, and yeah. But where the hell did this conversation stop?
It's a Minardi conversation right now. Yeah,
I forgot.
How the hell did we end up here?
We ended up. Was it Hadjar and bad? No, it was bad starts to your career getting better.
Oh, this shows you how lost we all are as human beings. We are this much in the trenches of Formula One. Just trivia, but
I love these times.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back to Minardi here. Getting back to Minardi.
Yeah,
Patrick Freesacker, let's go.
I'll get back to Minardi then. I think Red Bull, in my opinion, made a bit of a baffling choice to keep Lawson instead of Tsunoda in the second RB seat for next year, as I think you could argue that 2024 Tsunoda was a better season than 2025 Lawson, and that's basically what you are comparing. And in my opinion, the main reason why they kept Lawson is that this way you can get a better comparison between Lindblad and Hadjar to see if Hadjar doesn't work out and Lindblad just completely decimates Lawson, then Lindblad could probably do a better job. But if Lawson and Lindblad are sort of head to head, then even if Hadjar is struggling, you're gonna have to keep him or find something else. So I think that's the main reason why they decided to keep Lawson in the car. Go on, Nedzo.
I was gonna say, I think the reason why they've gone for Lawson instead of Tsunoda is because Tsunoda in 5 years has done a whole bunch of nothing. He started off shit, got average, and then he was sort of doing well in 2024 and at the start of 25. But the thing is, we've seen what his peak is. His peak is slightly better than average. Whereas with Lawson, I think it's a small chance, but it's still a chance that he could show some development and a bit, because bear in mind he's just done his first full season in F1. I think that there is a small chance that he could come good and maybe not become a world champion, but at least get into that first Red Bull team or build out a good career like a Gasly, like an Albon, somewhere else. Whereas with Tsunoda, the only other place that anyone would have ever taken him was Aston Martin because of the Honda connection. Whereas with Lawson, he's actually got a future in Formula One. Tsunoda had, beyond this season, realistically no future in Formula One, and I think that's why they've done it. Also with you could argue the links between Hadjar and Lindblad, but again, Lawson's got better this year. Lawson was infinitely better at the end of the year than he was at the start of the year. So I think it's just that Lawson has more potential, and we already know what Tsunoda can do. So let's get. It's kind of a similar logic to, even though the logic was wrong in 2019 to promote Albon instead of Kvyat. It's a similar logic.
I have two thoughts on what was just said. First, on why Red Bull kept Lawson over Tsunoda. And I mean, it's just the elephant in the room. It's the Honda money that's going away. Honda is moving to Aston Martin. I mean, it's obvious to point out, but I think it's basically the main reason that they're choosing Lawson over Tsunoda, because there's not much between them. And I don't think that Lawson comes with much money either, but Lawson doesn't. Well, Honda probably were paying a lot more than with that gone away. Who's paying for Tsunoda anymore? I don't think anyone's paying for Tsunoda anymore. And Lawson, I don't know how.
I mean, put it to you this way. Put it to you this way. Like Liam's parents mortgaged their house or sold their house to just fund a Formula Regional Oceania campaign in 2020, in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were on the balls of their ass. And the only reason really that he got to where he did was because of the Red Bull funding and also because of Rodden, run by David Dicker, who, I think I heard someone say basically that if Rodden got into F1, Liam was a shoo-in driver because it said something along the lines of, if Red Bull don't take you up, I'll just buy a team and you're my driver, to that effect. So that's one of the backing. But before that, when the Red Bull money came in, would have been a stretch to see him back over in Europe. So that season saved his ass.
Yeah.
So comparatively speaking, not a lot of money as compared to the Honda backing. I don't know if it justifies some of the results though. So I don't know.
So
6.5 dozen of the other, I guess.
Humble beginnings, and he picked up a massive sponsor. And the other thing I wanted to say before that was as to how Lawson's career is going to go. There's only two things I can really see him do. Either he's going to become the new eternal Kvyat and become the benchmark forever for Red Bull Juniors at that Minardi team without any movement upwards or downwards. Really, that's one of the things I can see, because who's going to pay him up? And then the answer to that is he can go to the career graveyard team. He can go to Haas. I mean, if they take Ocon, they're going to take him as well. So I don't see anywhere else for him.
Option 3, he's got ties in America, because I think
Cadillac.
this is in America. No, thinking post F1 here.
Oh,
IndyCar.
yeah. True.
And then he can prove he's way better than Schumacher can.
Well, I mean, his driving style would lend to it. Whether he'll be successful or not, I can't give you an answer. But, there are some people that just excel in one part of motorsports and don't excel. And there are some that excel in one part, don't excel in another. Just got to find your niche, I guess. Whether Liam would be good in IndyCar, I don't know. But if he wants to stay in F1, if he doesn't want to be sent to the glue factory, he needs to be a hell of a lot better next year than he is this year.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's balls in his court in that one. The other thing is that we're operating on the basis that Red Bull's even going to have an option for 2027. So who's in their Red Bull junior team right? I'll try and speak English. Who's in their Red Bull junior team right now? You got Solov, who's a solid driver, but his temperament sometimes gets the better of him. So God knows. Again, a lot of this is hinging on what they get in F2, because F2 is a complete friggin' lottery. Marco erroneously signed Alex Dunn as well, and he's a gun driver, but on the basis that he's not in their team after being signed by Marco. Like, I don't know. Who else is in their junior team right now?
Pepe Marcy left. Like, there's
Marcy left, yeah.
Crawford left. Montoya left.
Is Iwasa still there? Because he turns up at races a lot as a reserve.
Thanks for reminding me. That guy should have been in. Like, to me, he is just as quick as Yuki, but he's got the temperament of like a Piastri. Just why they never ran with him, I don't know. Even after winning the Super Formula Championship, it's just like, give him a go, guys. For God's sake, what are you doing? I don't know.
Tim Tramnitz and Ollie Goethe, are they still in it? Or
I don't think so.
I know Goethe is, yeah. Tramnitz, I don't know. But I don't think they're a threat for the F1 seat at Racing
There's
Bulls.
that Finn McLaughlin, there's some Lebanese guy, but they're like
Fionn McLaughlin, he's too
Formula
low.
4 level. Yeah, that they need a few.
Fionn's in Formula Regional right now. I think he's going up to F3 this year. Next year. So he's not there yet. Of course, they could sign someone outside their program, but I'm still baffled why they never ran with. He's busy. He's going to be busy racing Ford Rangers in the Baja. He's found his happy place.
Well, the thing, with Helmut gone, from now, that probably will change things significantly in terms of the kind of drivers they pick and promote and everything.
Because Marco loves his Mavericks. You know, he typically loves the Maverick drivers. So what type of drivers will they sign now? Who's in charge of that, of the recruiting, of the scouting? Who are they looking for? Because I think they always had the mentality of looking for the next Max Verstappen. It's like, well, may not be the right mentality. Just got to find the right driver for yourself. Like, someone I would have immediately picked up is Christian Costoya in karting. He's been picked up by McLaren, but Hadjar didn't even really scout. Marco didn't even really scout Hadjar. It was Checo down at turn 1 of Barcelona who's like, oh, this kid's good. Marco's like, oh, okay, sweet. So
maybe they could be finally get their hands on Freddie Slater.
He's not affiliated with anybody.
That's what I'm saying.
He could be a good option. Yeah, exactly. But again, he won't be ready because he's in F3 this year. I don't know. They're painting themselves into a corner here, and really, this all could have been sussed out years ago if Marco didn't have that knee-jerk reaction in signing Nick De Vries. And De Vries is damn good, one of the best go-karters of the past 30, 40 years. But he signed him based on the Monza performance. It didn't work out, and he sent him to the glue factory after 10 rounds, then ran with Ricardo. And it seems like on a week-on-week basis that Marco was changing his mind. It's like, you could have ran with Liam or Ayumu for those 2 years, and by the end of 2024, you would have had a proper answer as to where those drivers were. Instead, they pissed around.
Sorry.
Huh?
Do you know whom Franz Tost wanted to sign instead of Nick De Vries? Because it wasn't Tost who wanted De Vries. Tost wanted to sign Mick Schumacher instead of De Vries.
All right.
At the time.
I think I remember seeing that.
Yeah, that was interesting. I would have loved to see that myself.
If only we still had in-season testing, because then they could actually test the drivers properly before putting them in a race and see if they actually know how to wheel. And that, but otherwise, it's just
got to save money and make things fair in a 24 race championship.
Yeah, and it's just going off, simulator bullshit, or here's your one FP1 session that you get for the year. Come on, you got 90 minutes to prove yourself to us.
Put the FP1 drivers, put the juniors into the sprints.
Yeah, the sprint championship for reserves, or just bring back Friday drivers.
Yeah,
something like that. Because otherwise, we're going to have this
full-time drivers in the sprints.
Otherwise, it's just going to be this kind of constant problem. I can't even remember who the big contenders in the feeder Formula are these days, because I paid so little attention to Formula 2 this year. It was just so hard to care, when in previous years it's usually been better than Formula 1. Because Fornaroli, he got lapped up by McLaren, I think, and I think the only worse junior program he could join was Aston Martin in terms of dead ends. But he could have gone to Red Bull. That would have been a reasonable prospect. But with Lindblad, maybe it's British bias. I just don't see it, because in terms of he's won a regional championship in the Macau race, but at least with Antonelli, he was winning titles, even if all of those titles were against some pretty crap opposition. But Lindblad was okay in Formula 2, and it's and everyone's like, oh, this guy's insane, he's going to be amazing, and I'm just like, I don't know.
So hard to judge in F2 again, because the last few years in particular, you don't know where the hell anybody is, because you don't know what kind of engines they've got. And I know it's an easy cop out, because people say, "Oh, your favorite driver didn't win." It's like, well, no, it's the fact that you're seeing drivers going up behind another car, through the Camel Straight. They get DRS, and the car's going further ahead. For God's sake, man. It's almost as erroneous as the Euro Formula Open Championship, where Marino Sato had a car where they ran 10 degrees more wing on the rear, and it was still faster on the straights. And that means, really, that, the results are skewed. And in a championship that is so important towards the overall image of them in the paddock, it's just appalling, and it's gotten to a stage really where they don't trust the results anymore. The people in the paddock, And if that's the case, it's like, well, why send them there at all? Send them to Super Formula, where may not be equal, but at the very least, they teach those drivers to race. If you go off the track, if you drive stupid, well, you just die, which is what happened to Liam in the second to last round. It cost him the championship. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the course of action is here, really, because 2027, they may or may not have a Liam Lawson who will be solid, but you also don't know if Arvid Lindblad's going to sink or swim. Like, it's a hell of a corner they painted themselves in here.
No. Have you noticed that the only time we ever talk about the junior categories these days is when we're talking about Minardi? Like, for other teams, the juniors aren't even a discussion anymore, usually.
Well, I mean, Aston Martin, they had Felipe Drugovich, who was led on for the longest time, said, we may give you a seat. It's just like, Drugo, there's only really one seat up for grabs in that team. And you're relying on Fernando, saying he doesn't want in on the sport anymore. And he joined at a time where Fernando was getting on the podium again. It's like, and he turned down a Chip Ganassi's seat in IndyCar. It's like, all the success that Palou had, that could have been you, and instead you kept on with this goddamn dream. And the other one is Jack Crawford. I think he's in the team now. It's like, I don't have a lot of confidence he's going to, fare better.
I don't think any of those guys are ever going to get one of those seats. Even if Alonso retires, Lawrence Stroll is just going to get the next star driver next to Stroll. I don't think there's any chance that any of those juniors are going to go in there. Like, there's also zero chance that Honda are going to somehow get Tsunoda into the second Aston Martin seat. That's just not what Lawrence Stroll is looking for. I don't see it happening. Like, Lawrence Stroll always made sure that there's really strong drivers next to Stroll, or solidly rated drivers during the different eras, with the exception of Sirotkin. Like Massa, he had a driver he could learn a lot from, a very experienced driver. Checo, highly rated at the time, pretty good driver. Stroll learned a lot from him, and eventually, we know what happened in 2020. Then 2021, 2022, Vettel, four-time world champion who could teach Stroll. Like, he always tries to get mentor figures in there, or really good drivers who could drive the team forward while Stroll was still supposedly learning. I don't know. I don't think Stroll has taken any steps forward much in most areas. Only one area, but we'll get to Aston Martin eventually. But yeah, I don't see those other Aston juniors ever making it into that team. And also, I don't rate Drugovich because, like, third season champion, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, something like that.
And the grid wasn't brilliant. It goes back to the whole F2 crap about where the hell his first season was pretty decent. Second season, not so much. I think he got bugger all good results. Then third season, he dominated.
Yeah, but against what grid?
I can't remember off the top of my head which grids he had, but my point is, again, when you got cars that are performing so goddamn differently, it's hard to draw judgment out of that. And that's what irks me. Is not that, it's not dismissing drivers' achievements. It's just the fact that I don't know what to compare them to, because I don't know who's got a good engine or not. So yeah, when you talk about third season champions, stuff like that, well, the first thing is, again, the whole engine thing. We don't know where they are. Don't know what cars and teams are good in any one particular year. But also, it's a little bit funny because a third year champion sure as shit was not slander enough in the 70s or 80s. It was kind of like learning your stripes at those times. Since then, it's sort of been ridded, and we've had occasional seasons like Pastry, where it was just bang, 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 wins. And it's almost become expected, which is a little bit weird in my opinion, but
What I think about that is that it's gotten a lot worse since they introduced the ground effect cars into Formula 2. Before that, we had a lot more consistency between the F2 seasons, where the teams it was a lot more consistency. You could take a lot more conclusions from that. But ever since those ground effect cars, for example, Behrman and Antonelli at Prema, they were absolutely nowhere in that car And I don't think it reflects much on either driver. Like that season is so hard to interpret for so many drivers. And F2 has just been the same since. F2 is just no longer representative really of anything. And it also has turned out that, well, in most cases, it's not even the best F2 drivers anymore who do get the F1 seats. Like the ones finishing at the top, like even the position on doesn't really matter that much anymore. Oftentimes you already know quite early on, okay, this guy is definitely moving up. Like, who of us didn't see Lindblad going into F1 10 months ago? I think it was quite obvious already.
He's the only one from this grid. I mean, I think only 2 of the last 5 F2 champions have gone straight to Formula One, or only one of them actually. Only Bortolesso. The rest have all had to wait for a year or for forever to get there.
I just want to pick up on something that Josh said. He said that back in the 1970s and during the 80s and those earlier years, you could have a couple of years developing your craft and then you get into F1. That was because at the time there were 30 seats on the actual grid and then billions of testing roles. Nowadays, you have 20 seats on the grid and the testing roles mean nothing. That I think that's part of the reason why younger drivers, unless you are a prodigy who shows immediate results, that's why you don't get a look in. This is a stat that I always come up with when people mention third-year champions. Drivers who run their Formula 2 or GP2, I haven't gone back to F3000, I might do that as well. Drivers who have won a Formula 2 or GP2 championship in their 3rd season or more, so they were even their 3rd season, 4th season, 5th season even. Between them, they have 1 Grand Prix win, and it was Pastor Maldonado.
I was about to say, as soon as you said that, I'm like, well, hang the fuck on. Like, I know a dude who won his 4th year, who won a race, 1 win. Oh my god.
That's such a Nedzo statistic.
Mm-hmm. I think all these reserve and junior drivers, I think they're basically competing to try and beat Callum Ilot's record for most FP1 appearances with the most teams without ever actually starting a race.
Yep.
Because nobody has ever got so close to Formula One and not actually got into it than Callum Ilott.
I mean, there were some guys back in the day when you had 3rd cars in free practice 4 back in the 2000s for Minardi, especially like people like Matteo Bobbi and a couple of other Italian guys that were Enrico Toccolello, people who got very close. They had like 15 or 16 FP1 or free practice appearances that never got a shoe in for an F1 seat.
Peter, didn't Schwartzman get the same? Didn't he get just as close as Ilott?
Oh, he had an avalanche of FP1 sessions and that nothing happened. I think him being Russian and Israeli has basically consigned him to oblivion. So,
yeah, those 2 basically. Should we move on from Minardi or? I think it's a lot of time. We've been there for over half an hour.
Let's get in there before tomorrow arrives.
The sun's going to be coming up soon for you, isn't it?
Yeah, you can turn up the lights.
I can see it through the blinds.
Oh god.
So it is actually Aston Martin next on the subject of Drugovich. So I think for me, like at the beginning of the season, Alonso was abysmal, and I was thinking, okay, I think he's just going to give up and retire at the end of the season. But then he kind of got into a rhythm, and Stroll had a couple of good races early in the season, but after that, he just kind of became very anonymous and just not really. He didn't crash much except in Kota. Didn't have many like big races driving into the points, and it was just a quiet season. But Alonso seemed kind of happy, even though it wasn't the best season necessarily. So maybe he's confident that they'll be good next year, or he's just accepted that number 3 is not happening.
I'm gonna comment about Aston Martin, and then Ace can tell me that I'm wrong. Okay, so I think Alonso had a really strong season, and I think in quali, obviously, he absolutely decimated Stroll. But I think Stroll on Sundays has been mostly overlooked this year because he brought himself into such difficult positions on Saturdays that he basically always had to go with the insane strategy that meant he had to do 50 laps on a soft tire or something. And I think this is the one area that Stroll really developed this year. Stroll, to me personally, in my opinion, Stroll has easily been tire manager of the year for those because there was every other race, this guy did basically the longest stint of the race on a tire, often not even on the hardest tire. And while, yes, he brought himself into a situation where he had to deliver that strategy, where they had to try that to maybe profit off a safety car, you still have to have the pace to not lose so much time on that age-old tire that if the safety car comes, you're still in a position to actually profit from the insane strategy. And he did deliver on that. And he kept his head down throughout the season for the most part and just did the job. And he scored the points when Alonso faltered at the start of the year. Quali was abysmal. I'm not denying that. But I think this was probably the cleanest season we've seen from Stroll in terms of incidents and everything. And he's taken a step forward on the tire management front. I don't think there's any denying that. But yeah, so on Sunday, oftentimes he even matched Alonso on pace if you look at the telemetry data. But Saturday is abysmal, and of course Alonso still has the considerably better racecraft and everything. But I mean, you need to give the devil his due. Like when there's something to say compliment, then you have to, I like to do that for Stroll. So yes, that's my 2 cents on Aston Martin. I think both drivers actually had a pretty solid season, and one went really overlooked.
I mean, it's true that he's had a cleaner season. I mean, throughout his entire career, Stroll has always been error prone. How many of you remember crashes, spins, losing the car?
Yes.
And this year, when it happened twice at Zandvoort, and then he had a collision with O'Connor at the sprint in Austin, and that's it, of mistakes, crashes. So that is an improvement. But other than that, Stroll has been the same. Even tire management, he's good. He's not the best. Norris is very good on tire management because we saw a race in Hungary where he had to do a one-stopper and have enough pace to make it work. And Norris is capable of having enough pace even on long stints. Stroll is capable of doing very long stints, but not on the pace he needs. The one time that going long on a stint actually worked this year was Abu Dhabi. And that's because for 10-15 laps, Alonso matched the Stroll pace and kept everybody behind him. So even then, he needed some help. So, yeah, Stroll has only been slightly better this year than all the other years. And just because he's made less mistakes. Everything else is exactly what we know of him. He's inconsistent. He's not a great qualifier. And then in the races, unless things go his way, he's not gonna score because he never has enough pace to actually go for a normal strategy and score points, not with the competitiveness of the Aston Martin in the last 2 years. So, in that sense, Stroll has been so-so.
Yeah, what I meant basically on the tire management thing that I said is that Stroll oftentimes, through his insanely long stints, did bring himself in a position, and they had to actually deliver that pace to profit if the safety car that they gambled on would have come. Had his pace not been good enough, he wouldn't have been in the top 10 for that eventual safety car. But he was there until they pitted him because they eventually had to give up because there was just no safety car coming. But I would argue that in past seasons, he wouldn't have managed his tires for that long, and as a result, he wouldn't have been able to even stay in the top 10 and keep the tire alive for long enough to not fall back before that point and lose out on the advantage that the insanely long stint would give him in case a safety car came out. And that's why I see the improvement. He did insanely long stints alone. Of course, yeah, if your pace is abysmal, they're not going to help you. But if you have the speed to get into the top 10 with that strategy, and that's not a given in a car that oftentimes, like it wasn't very often a top 6 car, then you know that there's an argument to be made there, in my opinion.
There's a couple of things that I want to add to this kind of conversation. People talk about certain drivers and how the ground effect regulations have kind of brought them back a step. Hamilton is one of them. I think Stroll is also one of them. Like his form in 2020 and 2021 was the best of his career. He was better than Perez in 2020, and he was, I wouldn't say comfortably, but he had the edge over Vettel in 2021 when they both didn't have any issues. But in 2022, that flipped on its head, and Vettel had a sort of advantage over him. I think that next year, with the ground effect regulations coming out of play. He has more of a chance of beating Alonso than he has in any previous year. I don't think that he will. I don't think that he is dead certain to do it, but he's been in certain races this year. He's been better. Silverstone, he was fantastic. I know he got a bit lucky with a strategy, but when it's changeable conditions, he's the one, and him and the team are making these calls. He went from, what was it, 19th to 3rd in like the first 12 laps. He was very good at doing that. He was good in, even in Australia. People talk about how he was miles behind Alonso when Alonso crashed. Alonso crashed. He was the one who made the error. And people talk about, oh, there was gravel on the track. Well, then no one else had that problem. So why is Alonso the one spinning off? That I think that, especially, well, we all know how people have. There are so many memes online about how Lance is good in changeable or wet conditions. I think that Lance, when things are going his way, is very good. And also, people talk about qualifying. In 2020, even in qualifying, he was matching or beating Perez. And I know Perez isn't the best qualifier, and that Racing Point was maybe a bit underperformed by both of them. But I think that when Stroll is firing on all cylinders, when he's in a car that is good, that he enjoys, because 2023 is an outlier because it was a car that was good, but he didn't enjoy it because of a ground effect, because of his injuries from pre-season that I think hampered him. Because at the end of that, like Stroll in the last 5 races of 2023, Stroll outscored Alonso, and Alonso didn't have a retirement in there, I believe, in Mexico, so that's maybe a bit of a it's not the most representative thing, but Stroll. I think people underestimate how much the injuries affected him in 2023 when the car was good and when Alonso was doing better. He was better than Alonso in 2024, in my opinion. And this year, he wasn't better. I think Alonso managed to resurrect some of his form, be a bit more consistent, and generally deliver most weekends where the car was capable. But in the races where the car is kind of fringe top 10, where they're not sending him on ridiculous strategies, which happened in about a third of the races, I think that Stroll delivered. Maybe not all of the time, but at least, and considering that he got 24-0 in qualifying, he did a good job in the races. And can he improve in certain areas? Yes. Can he improve in consistency? Can he? Is it maybe the case that Alonso isn't as good of a teammate as we think? Possibly. But I think that in 2026, if Adrian Newey produces a nice car that he enjoys, bearing in mind the 2020 Racing Point was probably quite a balanced, stable car. If Newey produces a balanced, stable car, which I know is against his kind of prerequisite, but we could see an interesting situation where Alonso, with we talk about car performances. If Stroll doesn't like the oversteery car, then what's Alonso going to do? I think that Stroll has a chance of beating Alonso in 2026. It's not a big one. I'd say probably 30%. That Alonso is going to be beaten by Stroll next season in the championship, or overall in terms of performances, because we know this. Stroll can beat a driver over the course of a season in terms of head-to-heads, but then be 100 points back in the standings, and it doesn't make any sense. That kind of stuff happens.
I don't think there's a 30% chance that Stroll beats Alonso. I think there's a 5% chance that Stroll beats Alonso, and I'm a Stroll supportive. But yeah, so much about that. I would just argue that Alonso has had a lot of trouble this year. Like, he's had 4 big incidents, and I don't fully blame him for the incident with Lawson. I think that one was on both of them. But he's just had the bigger and more costly incidents of the two, and that's uncharacteristic, and that might be indicative of developments with both drivers. And we'll see where that leads next year. But Alonso has thrown away points either fully on him or partially on him on 4 occasions this year, and that's mistakes of a caliber that Stroll didn't make. When Stroll had the incident with who was it, Ocon, it didn't cost him points.
Yeah,
he wasn't in a running for points anyway. He didn't throw away points at any point this year, not once.
I even think that if the Aston wasn't the worst car I've ever seen on its tyres, that he could have got a podium in Silverstone, because he had the pace and the consistency to get a podium, I think, or at least the top 5.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Silverstone, until the DRS got turned on, he was holding off Hülkenberg, and the moment the DRS got turned on, Hülkenberg just breezed past in what was easily the 4th or 5th best car that weekend, and the Aston just wasn't. Like, if you look at the data, especially even from Bortoleto on the first 2 laps before he crashed out, the Sauber was a considerably faster car. But I mean, my top driver in Silverstone was Gasly, and we're gonna get to Alpine eventually. But there's that. I think we're probably not wanting to remain the only people who speak about Aston Martin, let's defer to Jack and Josh here and Tizi.
I mean, no matter what, I still think if Aston Martin want to be serious in the future going forward about winning championships, winning races, then they have to get rid of Stroll. He's never really impressed me at all whatsoever, and I think his attitude is pretty damn awful. And I think a lot of people, I can't remember where I heard it, but heard someone talk about how he seems a lot less open and interactive with fans. I'm talking about Stroll here, but again, I've just never really liked him. And again, yeah, if he was out of F1, great. Then Aston Martin could at least try and move forward. But at the moment, it just seems like he's just there, and no one can really take him seriously as long as he's there. And again, no matter what, he's been given many, many chances to actually prove himself. And he's been in F1 for a long time now, but nothing. And Fernando, he's only got a couple of years left at the maximum to get something out of the team. And we don't really know. Because with Nui, it takes a good couple of years before we see Nui really, his input come out on the track. And there's also going to be team principal, let's not forget. So we don't really know what's going to happen there. It could be a disaster. It could be a success. I know, obviously, Nui's got plenty of success to back him up in previous years, in previous decades. But again, it all comes down to Lance. And yeah, just get rid of him, and then I'll take Aston Martin seriously.
I don't think there's an Aston Martin without Lance, though. At least not Aston Martin without Lawrence. In terms of Alonso, I don't think there's one chance that Alonso might not finish his career at Aston Martin. He could reunite with Briatore at Enstone.
A 47-year-old Alonso going for his fourth stint.
I don't care.
Briatore himself is almost 80 now as well.
Yeah, he's ancient as well.
He could go back to Le Mans, though. He has spoken about how he would like to do Le Mans again with Max as a teammate, so we'll see what happens there.
Or attempt at IndyCar if he's really desperate for the Triple Crown.
I'll tell you what, it does drive me up the wall how there are certain drivers, like for example Villeneuve and Montoya, who won. I think it's almost inarguable that the Monaco Grand Prix and the Indy 500 are the two harder of the Triple Crown to win, and that the Le Mans is kind of just like the third wheel, and as long as you can get in a decent enough car, you can just do it. It annoys me how Villeneuve and Montoya have Monaco or the F1 Championship, and they have Indy. Yet they haven't. I don't think Montoya or Villeneuve had a proper go at Le Mans, and I think they could have both done it if they'd have.
Doesn't Montoya have a class win at Le Mans? So I think he's there's someone that does, and is like the next closest thing to the Triple Crown after Graham Hill.
I don't know, but it does annoy me because Villeneuve and Montoya, especially even like a 2000, even post F1 Villeneuve, if he'd have just got in like one of, I don't know which was a dominant car in Le Mans at that time, but he could have just got in it and won, and then they could have had a massive story about it.
One thing I can say about the situation of the Aston Martin drivers is that they're not good for each other in the sense to what they appear to the wider public, because either Stroll is completely awful and Alonso is matching him by dropping off with the age, or Alonso is keeping up a very high level and Stroll just looks bad, although he's a decent driver. And it's not good because Alonso fan will say Alonso is very good, other will say no, Stroll is very bad and Alonso is dropping, and there will never be a consensus because unless they get different teammates to have comparisons, we'll never know the answer to which is which. The good thing is that now that they have Newey, and Newey is there as somewhat of a co-owner of the team, if you understand what I mean. He owns a small chunk of the team. And therefore, if after 2026 Stroll is no longer in the team, it means Newey didn't want Stroll in the team. If Stroll is still there in 2027, it means he's good enough for Newey to keep him there. So we'll have an answer, at least through Newey.
Stroll's definitely good enough to stay in F1. I think there are a lot of people who say, for example, he's the worst driver in F1, especially on this year's form. That's not even close. I think there's certain drivers who really perform. I'd say I think I put him 14th on my list this season of driver performance, and I think that's about fair. He was just kind of middle of the road. But I think that with as I said about this was his best season in the ground effects regulations, in terms of overall performance. I think that 2024 was probably quite close, but I think that he could easily, with the flat bottom cars, get back to his 2020, 2021 form and do what he did in those years. But then again, Stroll's inconsistent. We don't know.
I think this year we've seen Stroll sort of clean up his act, stop constantly crashing into each other and into the wall for no reason at all, which is, a very good thing from somebody who is in their second, third year. Stroll just completed his 9th F1 season. We are talking about somebody who has more experience than Charles Leclerc. It is just absolutely baffling how he stayed in F1 for so long, but how it takes him 3 times as long to sort of make these small improvements that is basically expected out of every rookie or every second year driver, that, well, now you're going to stop crashing, the next year you're going to get consistent, learn how to manage tires and whatnot, and by year 3, 4 you're going to sort of start reaching your peak, like Piastri did, for example. And then there's Stroll, who did absolutely nothing, and then sometimes he found some pace, and then this year he finally managed to stop crashing. So it takes some drivers 1 year, takes some drivers 9 years. It's just awful.
I would argue that he had it in 2021 and 2020 and 2021, but then he was just pegged back by the ground effect, and then he restarted the cycle.
We were here before.
We do want to move on to the next team now, anyway, because unless someone wants to add anything.
So next team is Haas. It should be interesting for them going into next year, I just thought, because with Cadillac there's going to be a bit of friendly competition as 2 American teams, even though one of those teams is more American than the other, even though both teams are based in Britain and have majority British staff and blah, 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 and no American drivers, but who cares? But even so, I'm enjoying them more under Ayao Komatsu than I am under bloody Gunter Steiner, and I think everyone else in the team is, because they're going a lot better. They, again, as we said right at the beginning about biggest comeback, the first race was a train wreck, and there were a lot of races early in the season where Behrman in particular qualified last, and then we got to the point where he was doing regular points and nearly got a podium, so they had quite a big turnaround. So things are good, but they're not as good as they are at like Williams, for example, comparing other midfield teams.
Yeah, I mean, Behrman had some very good standout performances. People forget about Suzuka, for example, because it was so earlier in the season, because stuff like Mexico happened, and there are a couple of other races. I do think that I think that it'd help if, as some people said earlier, it'd help if Ocon was actually not just consistent, but even more consistent than he's been, or just as consistent as he's been in previous years, because there were some real dips in performance from him. But overall, I think that Haas have a good basis for next season. They've had a couple of unspectacular years leading up to this one, and I think they might just continue being the unspectacular team of unspectacular teams for the next 5 seasons or whatever. But I believe that Behrman's had some very good standout performances, and that in his second year he will inevitably cut out some of the daft stuff that's happened. Hopefully the stewards will stop targeting him, because that's what they've. I'm not going to suggest it's active targeting, but it's just daft, some of the things they've done, and the penalties he's gotten are usually exaggerated. Ocon, he just needs to build on, because 2025 was, I'm not going to say rock bottom, but it was very close. If he can get back up to his Alpine form, his Alpine in terms of the early ground effect or late flat-bottomed turbo hybrid cars, then Haas have a very good platform. If they have a midfield car, one driver who is bound for a Ferrari even if that in itself is a career death sentence. You have one driver who's bound for a top team and one driver who's very decent. They have a good platform to just kind of be midfield. Kind of maybe they can get back to their 2018 form. I don't know.
Look, Ocon has a big problem as a driver. He's a trulli, okay?
Yes.
And we see this trend in the ground effect cars, as you said, where some drivers get worse as these cars get more extreme. You know, it's the case for Hamilton. You made the case, it was also the case for Stroll. And it is the case for Ocon, you know. They brought an upgrade after Austin at Haas, and Ocon was completely lost while Berman was putting together awesome performances. At Alpine last year, he started the year very strongly. Then upgrade after Monaco, and he was kind of there with Gasly. Then new upgrade, he was nowhere near Gasly. Then you look at the other years, it's the same. Even in 2022, he had some random races where he was nowhere near Alonso. The point is, for Lewis Hamilton, you can clearly make the case this problem is restricted to the ground effect era. For Ocon, you cannot, because in 2021, at some point, he had a cracked chassis, which took the engineers so long to find, because at the end of the day, it was a small crack on the suspensions, and engineers were sure that could not have cost the driver half a second. Anyway, they gave him a new chassis, and they found back the half second that Ocon had lost. So, you know, a small problem, and it snowballed into such a big gap. In 2020, it took him very long to get back into the groove of Formula One and to get familiar with the car. In 2018, he claims there were many problems and issues with the team, and I believe that because it almost went bankrupt, the 2018 Force India. But anyway, in 2018, he had a worse season than he had in 2017. So you see, there's a clear issue with Ocon that if the car is not to his liking, he's way off the pace, but way off. And so, as a result, if you try to compare drivers through Ocon, you get this difference that maybe in a season he felt less issues than in another, and therefore in a certain season he performed at a way higher level than in another season. And so I honestly don't think this is ever gonna get fixed. You know, this is intrinsic to Ocon, and it's always gonna be like this with him. And people have need to start to understand that Ocon is very much like Trulli. That is, when everything is right, Ocon is even mighty fast, but otherwise he's lost.
I made this case a few times recently, throughout this year, really, that I personally believe that Ocon has been a massive downgrade over Kevin Magnussen. And Ciaron actually agreed with me with this, which actually quite surprised me that he agreed on this, because I know that Ciaron actually likes Ocon. But the way that Ocon has performed to me has been a massive downgrade over Magnussen. And I'm not saying that Ocon is the worst driver than Magnussen. What I'm basically saying is that we're seeing Ocon in the worst form of his career, comparing him to Magnussen with magnificent performances like Baku last year, 2024, yes. Like, in the best form of his career. Like, peak Ocon wipes the floor with peak Magnussen, no question. But peak Magnussen, I would argue, would be doing better at Haas this year than Ocon in the worst form of his career. I don't think there's much to say about that. We can also compare them a little bit, because we know how Behrman performed relative to Hülkenberg, and we know that at the time Magnussen was easily beating Hülkenberg last year in the second half of last year. So I don't know. I never thought that Ocon and Haas were a good fit anyway. I don't know how that came to be, but then again, I could never really picture Ocon at any other team than the French team. So I know he drove for other teams before, but that yeah, that was just weird to me. And I'm surprised, honestly, that they gave him another season next year, that the Ocon's going to be on the grid next year with how he performed at Haas this year. But maybe the new cars are going to be different. Maybe the flat floors, maybe it's going to make a difference and he's going to be back. I would like to see that, but if not, bring back K-Mac, man. Bring back K-Mac. I want him. Josh, you haven't spoken in a long time. Any comments?
Yeah, brain cells are dying off, man. I've seen one too many sunrises in a row. There's not a hell of a lot I can add more to Haas's season other than what's been said, what I've already said. The team definitely feels like it's being better run under Io than it ever was under the swearing merchant. The trajectory of the team for the future years, I don't really know because, well, they're just a team that's sort of relatively stagnant with regards to their place on the grid. And I don't know if that's going to improve too much, especially with what other teams are promising up and down the grid. You would hope Ocon's form improves, I guess, because a lot of the year Bear was outperforming him, but I mean, who knows?
Yeah, with Haas, they seem so unambitious. They're just content with being in the lower midfield. And they don't seem like they want anything more out of F1 than what they have. And Gene Haas doesn't want to sell either. Like I could see Toyota buying them eventually. Toyota's being more active there, getting more active. But Gene Haas, like many asked him to sell. Andretti asked him to sell. He didn't want to sell. He's just happy being nowhere, I guess. I don't know. I don't get it. I never understood Haas.
I mean, they're probably going to become a Toyota thing, especially with Komatsu running the team, and Ryo Hirakawa keeps doing sessions with them for some reason. And yeah, they're at this point they're more Japanese than they are American as a team. But Gene, like, he doesn't turn up to races much anymore either, so he doesn't seem to care much. I mean, Mark Slade did say that the team is tiny compared to something like Ferrari or Mercedes, so that does create limitations. But there's just been so little progress in their 9 years in Formula One.
We need to talk to Mark some more about Haas. We barely spoke to him about Haas. So, I guess next team? Who's that?
Sauber. Yeah, my biggest regret of this year is that when I was at Silverstone, I didn't buy a Sauber jacket. Because now that it's done and they have gone and they are Audi, now it's like it is vintage and everything, but it wasn't 6 months ago. And also the podium hadn't. Well, actually, no, this was literally just after the race, so Hulkenberg had just got the podium, and I should have bought it. But yeah, that's the big thing. Hulkenberg got the podium at last, and his qualifying was bloody awful, but he had lots of insanely good races. And Bortoletto was sometimes good and sometimes shit. But by Sauber standards, not bad overall.
Mm-hmm.
On the topic of Sauber, can I just say, when Hülkenberg got that podium, the behavior of the McLaren drivers was appalling, because whenever I saw that scene, what should have happened was what happened with Maldonado. They lifted him to their shoulders, and he was like celebrating, and everybody was like, "Yeah, let's go, we finally got it." And instead, he was just sort of left out and made feel very unwelcome and whatever. So I'm just very disappointed in that. And I mean, overall, Hülkenberg was just a bit of a disappointment, to be honest. Like I was probably the lowest on Bortoletto after like the first 2-3 races out of all of the rookies, and it was still a close fight. I think Bortoletto even beat Hülkenberg in qualifying, but they were very very close. Yeah, and yeah, I think Hülkenberg is just starting to fade, and I think he's definitely falling off. And next year he will definitely just fall a lot further, and as Bortoletto continues to get better, that gap is going to widen in the other direction pretty quickly, I think.
To be fair, I think that on the podium thing, I think if someone like Verstappen or Hamilton, one of the older drivers who had been with him for quite a while on the grid, I think they would have probably celebrated him a lot more. Like if it was, for example, Verstappen and Hamilton, they would have done something a bit more. But I think Norris and Piastri were just focused on themselves. They're like, oh, it's a novelty, but oh yeah, we just don't care.
Also, Hulkenberg has barely been around since they've both been in Formula One, because he was gone for like 2 years.
Yeah, I think that this is part of the thing. People are saying like Hulkenberg was shit in qualifying, and then Bortoleto was slightly better, and it's like, well, that's not a really good benchmark then. I do think that both drivers were just kind of I think that Bortoleto was definitely the most underwhelming of the rookies because I mean I know F2 results don't count, but he was the F2 champion, and of all of the rookies bar Doohan, I think he's had the lowest peaks of anyone. I think that Lawson's best race or best races were better than Bortoletto's. Yeah, obviously Bortoletto's average was better, but I think that that's part of a reason why I'd even rate Colapinto's season as better than his because he was just blindingly average. Like he had Hadjar's level of consistency, but like a much lower level of pace on average. And yeah, that could be part of the car. That could be partially due to the car. But I'd personally say that again, Bortoleto can only go up from here, and Hulkenberg can only go down from here, like Tuesday said. But I'd personally say that Bortoleto really needs to step up his game in 2026 if he's going to try and put himself on the same level as Behrman, as Hadjar, as Antonelli, as even as I said, Colapinto, in terms of being good in their first couple of years or first year in Formula One.
I just disagree on the basis of consistency. Again, I would put Bortoleto above Colapinto. I'm not sure. Like I understand that Colapinto was like close to Gasly, but that only and strictly only happened whenever Gasly was 20th. It was sort of the case with the Red Bull drivers that whenever Max was bad or like Max wasn't as good, Tsunoda was closer. Whenever Gasly had absolutely zero chance of finishing anything above second to last, Colapinto was right there with him, 5 seconds behind him in last place. And whenever Gasly was actually doing well, Colapinto was miles off. And so I just sort of disagree with that, because if you can only be really close with your teammate when he is having a bad race or when the car is completely hopeless, then I just don't rate that too highly, to be honest.
I'll just say, by the way, I know that there are a lot of these data nerd accounts on Twitter where they analyze like race pace and qualifying pace, and they're not all completely accurate, but most of them are saying that Colapinto was ever so slightly better than Gasly on average in race pace over the course of the entire year, even with his early season. We'll just call it tragedies.
I don't know how that works because I don't think he ever beat him.
No, he did.
No.
Like or like once or twice. Because even when he did in qualifying, it wasn't like he was chasing Gasly into Q2. It was more, yay, we're back on the back row together. Join me.
I'll tell you how that works. They often, at the end of races, they often pit Colapinto onto a soft tire and do some testing session, and he does insanely fast laps relative to Gasly because they just give up with him. That's how that works.
Beat him on 6 occasions. I quickly went through the results, and all of them were like by 1 or 2 places whenever they were for like 15th and 13th or something like that. So yeah, they're just fake results in my fake data in my opinion.
Fake news.
Did we move on to Alpine, or is this still Sauber?
This is still Sauber, supposedly.
Both, sort of.
Yeah, well, I guess there's nothing else to say on Sauber, so let's just say this is Alpine then.
Yeah, this is Alpine.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to mention Doohan specifically because I felt bad at the beginning of the season because I was like, well, he was given a 1-year contract, and then Briatore was like, no, you've got 6 races. It's like, that's how do you expect anyone to deliver it, especially a car like that, when you've suddenly completely turned what they thought was going to happen on their head and put a whole load of pressure on. But he hasn't helped himself recently, Super Formula to crash at the same corner 3 days in a row. Like, what you can't recover from that. Like, what's he gonna do now? There's nothing like. I mean, with that kind of crash record, he'd probably be a superstar in V8 supercars or something. But like, I don't know.
I genuinely think that Paul Aron now has a better chance at an F1 seat than Doohan does of rejoining F1.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Aaron was close because he had a couple of. I mean, for some reason, all of his FP1 sessions were with Sauber, but he'll probably get it at one point. I'm sure.
I think he might get a seat at Bag Marketing for like a year, but I don't think he'll do much special. Even though I do rate him, and I think he's quite a good character. I don't think he's that much special in terms of talent.
He's just a less racist version of Yuri Vips. basically.
Oh, jeez. That's a blast from the past. That dude was on a one-way ticket to Formula One, and then Twitch happened.
I mean, because he's not racing, and I was thinking about this a few days ago, because it's one thing to not be racing, but like, does he have a job? Is he just living on the street? Because he's engaged, his girlfriend, so there's a wedding to fund, and he hasn't. Maybe he is in the background testing or doing some simulator thing with one of the indie teams.
He probably just has wealth outside of Formula One, like most drivers do. So.
Probably, yeah, but yeah, I don't know.
Or just maybe he's just settled into a life of being a driver coach at a local racetrack. I guess like racetrack coaching on the weekdays and doing donuts in a car park on the weekends to make ends meet.
He can always get a job at the KKK.
Oh God!
When I joined this 3 or 4 hours ago, I did not expect that to come along.
Yep.
Can we move on, please?
That was about Jack, wasn't it? So yeah, Jack is screwed. But yeah, Colapinto was like, he finished 11th once, but otherwise he was just slow. And Gasly
by the way, sorry for interrupting. By the way, can we just compartmentalize here for a moment? Was Colapinto a worthwhile substitute for Doohan? Yes. Was he worth the trouble to go through and replace him? Because I don't think I'm a massive Colapinto mark. I love the guy to death, and I think he's got the potential to be very damn good in the sport. But was it worthwhile in the end? Was it really that much more of a marketable improvement over Jack Doohan at all, despite what came out?
The way I see it is, Doohan showed no real upside, no real like great performances. Like people can say that Colapinto on average was worse than Gasly by a country mile, even though I don't think that's the case. But he did beat Gasly on 6 occasions, which is, I mean, if you're looking on the pure just raw head to heads, that's a quarter of a season. Whereas Doohan did not beat Gasly I know he did 6 races.
It's a third of the season because it was 18 races as teammates.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So that's even better. Well, that what's it called? Doohan wasn't beating Gasly in two of his 6 races. He didn't do that.
I mean, Colapinto has a lot more sponsorship money. That's always great, but then he also has a much more psychotic fan base than Doohan did.
I do genuinely.
Well.
Doohan, in my opinion, Doohan should have never grossed a Formula One car. In my opinion, his track record in Junior Series wasn't good enough. And even in Abu Dhabi last year, like people talk about the pressure and stuff, he was just nowhere in Abu Dhabi last year. Like we saw with Behrman in the same season, what rookies can do when they have literally hardly any preparation. Doohan had more preparation than Behrman did, and I was more experienced, had more seat time, more Junior Series time, and instead of being quite close to his very highly rated teammate, he was 7 tenths off in qualifying and finished about a minute behind in the race.
Nearly crashed into Stroll.
Hold on, in Abu Dhabi, Doohan didn't have the same car as Gasly because Colapinto had crashed all the upgrades. They didn't have equal machinery. You cannot take that. I don't think Abu Dhabi is representative of that at all.
Alpine. Colapinto was with
Williams
hold on, last year.
Actually, hold on. Yes.
No. Right. Last year, it was
But Ocon also crashed, didn't he, at the end of the year? I think
maybe he did. But also, the thing is, he did the only actual on-track testing he did a session at Zandvoort in an older car from like 2 years ago. But other than that, it was just loads and loads and loads of simulator work.
What I'm saying was nonsense to some degree, but I'm actually it does apply to Colapinto because Colapinto did not have an equal car to Albon at the end of the year anymore because he crashed away all the upgrades there. So I guess my point would have been adequate to make hours ago.
Yeah. I think Doohan's only title, because like, when I ranked all the junior careers, I put his worst. I think his only title, if any, was like Australian Formula 4 or even Formula Ford. It was something domestic. It wasn't.
Who's this?
Doohan. He has one of the Australian.
He definitely did not win Formula Ford. He didn't win Formula 4. What the hell did he win?
Was it my it's been like Spanish?
He would have won. I'm probably thinking of like the Australian karting championship or something. He would have won that.
Yeah. I think that was at a time when Mick basically ran Australian karting in some capacity.
Okay,
I
he
think.
doesn't. Yeah, he
So-
doesn't have any titles. He's finished runner-up in 3 different things. Well, no, he finished runner-up in Formula 3 Asian twice, and then in Formula 3 itself once,
Wow.
and was third in Formula 2.
Yeah, which was a nothing driver.
Yeah.
I think Alpine were vindicated in replacing Doohan with Colapinto, not on the performance front as much, because if you look at the quali results, on average across all sessions throughout the year, the gap between Colapinto and Gasly and Doohan and Gasly, the difference between Doohan and Colapinto is only 2 thousandths. Just 2 thousandths between them. One is, I think, 3.39 tenths, and the other one is 3.37 tenths. But it was vindicated on the repair costs front, because Colapinto, while he also crashed, he did crash nowhere near as much as Doohan did per race, per 6 races.
I mean,
let's
he
just say on
crashed
average.
to crash 5 corners into your home race. I mean, admittedly, he's never driven in the rain before, but that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the only kind of saving grace or high point he can take from his 6 races is that in Japan he was the biggest mover because he went from 19th to 15th.
Wow.
He gained 4 positions. So
In a race where there were no undercuts, no overcuts, the tires didn't work, nothing happened, he gained 4 positions.
Well, 4
Hey,
Don't
at
go
least
to
he
the
didn't get
nothing
lapped,
else.
unlike Stroll.
Yeah, and if nothing else, 4 legitimate on-track overtakes not done in the pit lane. That's something, I guess.
It's like when Stroll overtook Hulkenberg at Monaco this year. It's like, wow, you were the only guy to overtake on Monaco. It's a cool stat, but it's nothing more.
It's like me trying to
I
defend.
mean, he did do it on the outside, so you got to give kudos to that. But then again, it's just like it's kind of like with Stroll, where it's just like if that's one of the 2 highlight reels from the year, what does it say about your year?
It's like me trying to defend Sakon Yamamoto by saying that he got the second fastest middle sector into Lagos in 2006 in the slowest car. That's his one thing that he did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazement.
A whole bunch of mid. We're just going to mention all the mid drivers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I mention some more mid? Because I'm not actually sure why Alpine decided to keep Colapinto, because in my opinion, of the current F2 field, there are 3 drivers who could do anything, at least of what I saw them this year. And one of them is Lindblad, who was already snatched up. And I'm really not sure why they didn't just take Fornaroli or Alex Dunn. Even if they do belong to driver academies, I mean, I'm sure they would rather take a seat at Alpine than just wait and hope that something happens. So I don't know why they decided to keep Colapinto, because yes, he has a psychotic fan base, but sure, that's no grounds to keep a driver who clearly isn't as good as his teammate and clearly won't be as good as his teammate, in my opinion. So I don't know if they see something in the simulator work or the data he provides or something like that. But I don't know why they decided to keep him.
I don't understand it either. And for me, it's even more weird because not just F2 drivers, but Kevin Magnussen is available. And he finished his career on a high in F1. Surely he must be better than Colapinto. Why doesn't Brett Hoare look at Magnussen? Because he is better than Colapinto. Easily.
I think, I mean, to us, there are loads of drivers that are better than Colapinto.
Yeah, but I mean,
some of them, like Magnussen.
Recent F1 experience is what I mean.
Yeah, I think money is a big thing because he does bring a lot from Mercado Libre, which I keep getting mixed up with Cerveza Cristal. But he is a pay driver light at least.
Yeah, he is.
Also,
Which is
why
so
are they
ironic considering he started at the start of his career, he had bugger all money to his name, and then he started doing well in F3, F2. The Argentine government, or at least higher ups in Argentina, finally got behind the guy. And now he's realizing that talent by qualifying 19th in a rebadged Renault.
This is something I was going to mention earlier about Liam Lawson, is that there are perks to being kind of a big fish in a small pond. because in the case of Lawson, he's the first major driver to come out in New Zealand for quite a long time.
Well, hang on. Brenda Hartley.
Yes,
but I don't consider that guy because he should have never been within 500 miles of an F1 car.
Yeah,
but Antonio Felix da Costa should have been there.
Yeah, but also he was literally a junior in like 2009. It's just you forget how long ago it was because he made such a late entry. He's quite a bit older than Liam, and then obviously Scotty Mack and Scott Dixon are a lot older. And and I think it's the same in Argentina that it's like there's a lot of good like regional drivers, but not many internationally.
I mean, it's just about the opportunity of go because you got to leave everything behind to go and present an opportunity for yourself. So at the age of 15, 16, these kids have got to move, halfway across the world, and just to start just the moving costs on their own are bad, and then there's not a hell of a lot of people in Argentina or New Zealand that have the resources to fund a $1.5 million, €1.5 million season in Italian F4. So, yeah, it's just way the world for motorsport, I guess. But I think other countries have it a lot worse.
Yeah, try being in Hungary.
Oh yeah. This is why I'm convinced that Joshua Dirksen is being funded by like cartel money or something. But I don't even know if they have much of a drug thing in Paraguay. But like,
I mean, he's apparently he's on advertisement boards in the main airport in their capital city. It's like I've never seen an F2 driver paraded around like that on a national scene. But yeah.
Okay, we've been here for 4 hours now. Let's quickly do tops and flops of the season and then wrap it up. I think tops of the season for me, for my three, Max, George, and Hadjar. I'd say
Max, George, Sainz for me.
I'll go for Max, the McLaren's engineering department and only that part of McLaren, and the Minardi social media team.
I think Max, Piastri, and Sainz for me.
Max, George, Charles for me.
I'll go for Max, George, and Behrman.
Max, Hajar, and then Norris because he won the championship.
Flops?
Flops is tricky because, like, I kind of want to say, like, Lando, Oscar, and Lewis, but I can't put the person who won the championship as a flop.
Can I do mine? Because I'm pretty confident in mine.
Yeah.
Hamilton, Tsunoda, doing.
Oh, yeah. That is better.
Yeah, well, I'll have what he's having. Basically, that's mine.
I think I'll say the same as well, actually.
I think I'll go for Hamilton, Tsunoda, and then probably just Papaya rules as a whole.
Hamilton, Tsunoda, Lawson.
I mean, if you're all afraid to say it, I'm going to say it. I'm Hamilton, Ocon, and Norris. Like, honestly, why do you make a title in such a dominant car look so difficult? Like, Ron Dennis wouldn't have suffered those fools. Like Ron Dennis would be spinning in his grave if he were dead, you know.
I think he's the first. I think he's the first person to win the championship and still fail in his task. Like, even though he did technically do it. Maybe. I mean, he at least could have had the excuse of reliability to cover things. But even so, he had his rookie teammate take the title to the final round.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, thank you all for doing this. Yeah. Good to wrap it all up. Good season, and next year. I mean, drivers are not confident, but I am very much. I always look forward to having Formula One back, and I am very, very, very intrigued to see what happens in 2026. I think it's a good one. Yes, and
Yes.
Cadillac having an 11th team. That hasn't happened for a long time, so that's going to be fun as well.
They're world champions. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Also, we
that's
can also
World
rest easy.
Championship.
Yeah, I mean, even though they've ruined it by getting the two most boring drivers they could, it's still a new team, so it's fine. But yeah, I think we can rest easy knowing that Lando, he's had his one title and there won't be any more. But yeah, bring on 2026. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. If you become a channel member, you get access to all this extra stuff and behind the scenes footage and everything else. And you can join our current members who are gone. Where are they? They are Spadgeman, Adriel B Gaming, Javad Amadov, Oscar Vagland, F1 Luca, Tiaro Martin, Burek Toshkun, Gittel Bedell, Elizabeth Hearn, Chris Odea, Blue Guy, and Lysenko. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.